Alright, this is going to be a recording in different parts of 10 minutes because Bandicam, period. That's it. That's why. I'm going to have a coaching session with LonelyBeing is her. I mean, I don't know if it's him or her, but I presume her. Yeah, I just made a gender assumption. Yeah, nice. Doing well. Good start. On Oceanic server, Australia, mate. We're going to talk with some Australians and see what's up. Yeah, that's it. I'll pull up her op.gg. Female avatar, I mean, that doesn't mean shit these days. Not gonna lie, that doesn't mean shit. But, yeah, anyway, so we're gonna record the session. And have some fun, hopefully. So, options. Font review, high-low play-by-play, live gameplay. I can do duels. We can do slow pushing exercises. We can do last hitting. We can do micro planning. I always wanted, like, this is just one of these principles of how you behave. I'm a fucking douchebag when it comes to actually showing up and doing shit. But I can't change that. That's just, like, time constraints and how well I can plan, right? Like, I suck. But in terms of social interaction, I will always apologize when I do something stupid like that. Okay, I can call. So, just... Hello there.
Is the mic fine? I can go get one to plug in because I'm just using a laptop.
Oh, no, that's absolutely fine, actually. Yeah, it's actually great.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Alright, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Okay, alright, that's good enough for now, then. Let's hope it stays okay, then, that's alright. Alright, well, I mean, let's see. Just because... just to verify, right? I think a while back, you said top lane. You still going with that, just to make sure?
Yes.
Alright.
I have yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. I got your op.gg 4 times here because browser glitch, but let's see. Okay. Is this still the account you're using right now?
The account I play on when I'm playing seriously, yes.
Oh, okay. So you got another one that you just try stuff out on.
That I just played the 14-minute game on. Yep.
Yeah, the 40-minute loss.
Yep.
I was like, that's impressive. Like, I just presumed you won, but it goes
I
both ways,
definitely did not win that game.
Then, well, impressive. Okay, I mean, fair enough. Obviously, usually one of the things I do, some things are based around 1v1s or duels, but obviously I can't do that because I mean, the game will be over before my first or second inputs arrive, so that's not an option. Some other options. Do you have any high preference in mind?
For like is that a selection I can choose from?
Yeah. So let's say, for example, the most common ones are simply going over a VOD or just doing like a live commentary, and there's also some other stuff. Like usually I also go over, for example, like wave management and let's say, for example, if I want to go into details on certain trades in a matchup, I might go pull up high elo VOD and just pause it and do that kind of stuff. Those are like
Okay.
the 4 most common things.
I'm not too sure about the live thing right now because I'm well out of practice, but I don't know, maybe. Uh,
I toast your rice, it'll just be 3 minutes.
Thanks. It's. I'm just getting the league client up.
Okay, sure.
I'm just checking to see if there's if I look at the games in the league client, maybe I might see a game I remember.
Right, in that case, I might want to make an Oceanic account real quick. I don't know. You can also send replays over to me. I guess that should still
Yeah, I
work.
can send you ruffles. They work.
Yeah. Let me see if I have everything set up on my end. Probably not. I'll be one step ahead of this and make sure I can actually open them. Yeah, that still works. Okay.
Yeah, profile. Hmm.
I took her out before and she didn't wait, she just started
I mean,
doing a
this
whole-
8-4 loss. It looks like I don't remember it, but it looks like fuck. Yeah, it's a different patch. I can't watch it. The patch just,
Right. And I don't have a setup on my computer with like previous clients. I know it's possible, but I I have no idea how that's done. So
Yeah, I can't even like grab the replay. So
okay. In that case, we can do other types of things.
okay.
How like what do you feel personally? What do you feel right now are your biggest weaknesses? Cause
Weaknesses.
yeah.
Well, that's my thought. No, weaknesses. I'd say there's nothing good. A weakness may be mentality. George in the Discord,
Yep.
like 7 months ago, we had a chat. I haven't been playing consistently. I'd have like a 3 month break, then play for a month, 3 month break. But I think I've been playing for the past 2 months, or like month and a half, pretty well.
Okay.
So that was just a mentality chat there, which was helpful at the time, but I think I wasted all of it because mentally, sometimes I'll be fine. Sometimes, well, I don't know what a good mentality is, but sometimes it'll all be about like, it's okay. I performed well. Team didn't, but I know what I did well now. I can do it again later. But other times, that's most definitely not the case.
Okay.
Another thing, my CSing got shit. I don't know why. And then I think my positioning in the lane, like, I don't know, spacing or whatever intelligent people call it, is pretty bad.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
with, like, lane bullies and shit, which I'm not sure if that's the case, but I seem to see them more often than not in my games in top lane. And I
Okay.
seem to get caught out by them too often, and because of that, I can't get around the map to help myself win because I'm too busy trying to go even, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so
You
I'm
got
misplaying somewhere there, well, everywhere there, but some places worse than others. I'm not very good at tracking the enemy jungler. like beyond second clear, especially. And then I'd just say consistency, which is probably pretty common for low elo.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. There are
And I
consistent
don't know what
players,
else.
but I mean, honestly, it's good. It's good if you lack consistency, because if you're consistent and you have a
Consistently
relatively,
bad.
yeah, it just means you're literally structurally not learning anything, not doing anything. It's a good thing.
I'm pretty sure I'm in that category
All right, fair
where
enough.
I'm not learning, not applying, not consistently improving.
Okay, okay, fair. Okay, I'll keep it in mind. That's quite a list. That's a good list, though. That's good.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
just trying to keep it, just trying to dig in, you know.
Yeah,
Trying to give
yeah.
you a big list.
So the more work you do, the less I have to like destroy someone's. Like someone's like, I have no weaknesses. My teammates suck. It's gonna be a hard one. It's gonna be a long session. Like, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what George sort of said that to me with the mentality shit about me because I was just toxic piece of shit. I knew I was bad. I still do. It's
Mm.
just I still flame people. It's not
Okay.
just because of their performance though. I just flame people because I'm a shitty flamer
Okay. Okay.
that can't focus. Yeah, okay. If that counts as a problem that can be solved, I can't focus. And if I lose any bit of control, um, that just leads me to lose more control. Because then it becomes like self-centered thought about ability level, if you know what I mean, in the game.
You mean like you're not good enough,
Yeah,
or?
I'll see it. I'll recognize that I've done something wrong.
Mm.
I can't figure out what it is, even though it's probably pretty obvious. And those mistakes and lack of self-awareness leads to like lack of identity as a player.
Okay.
I think that's a lot of problem as well because I can't trust myself with what I've been learning, if you know what I mean.
You mean to implement it correctly, or you trust
Well,
yourself? In what way do you mean?
like yeah, in implementation and
Yeah.
with even learning in the first place.
Okay. 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 that's that's fair enough. That's a lot to work with, at least. That's in a way
Yeah,
that's good.
you can pick and choose your what you're feeling like.
Yeah, yeah. Mm, okay, let's see. I'm just figuring out where to get started. It's just a little bit of what they call like choice stress. That's like a literal translation. I'm not sure if that's the English term, but
Choice stress.
yeah,
Oh,
it's like it's translated literally from Dutch, but I don't know how that pans out. Let's see.
mhm.
Okay, so I mean, CSing and auto spaces. Some of these are like we can just there's just like I got exercises. I can analyze it to infinity. That's gonna be fine. So let's start with something more substantial. That's just I guess some macro. Like maybe just keep it like just something macro that I could just explain, and it's pretty set in stone how it works. So I'll just start up a screen share real quick.
Yep.
And just as a note, my computer does not appreciate me screen sharing. It's like that.
Okay. Okay.
So let's see. I mean, it doesn't matter
Oh,
if
you
it...
got the compact theme. Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that was a thing. You...
Yeah. Normally you see people's profile pictures.
Um... Over here, or like, in what way? Like, do you only see their profile
Where the
pictures?
name is next to the name. Well,
Here. Oh, you mean over... Oh, you mean like this. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm glad because like the more information I can fit on the screen, the better. Like that is actually a good thing. Then nice.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
I am ready.
All right. So first, just let's just get the some stuff out of the way. Do you know the jungle respawn timer?
2 minutes 30.
Okay, okay.
Oh no, 9 minutes for the others. Right? What?
Yeah,
Am I wrong?
yeah. It's
And then
2:30 on every camp.
dragon. Um, hmm. I don't know. I want to say like 5 minutes, and then I want to say Baron is 5 to 6 minutes, and then like a 30 seconds, if you know what I mean.
Sorry, 30 seconds.
Like
What?
like for Baron, I mean like either 4:30 or like 5:30. Or that's older. Yeah, I
I
don't
think I
know.
think the Baron is 7,
Okay.
but yeah, unless I'm really wrong on that, Dragon is still 5, right? Or is I gotta admit, Dragon is 5, Baron is 7, if I'm not mistaken. But at least like the for jungle tracking, it doesn't matter. Let's just um, use the regular camps for
Okay.
now. You know it's 2:30. That's like the most fundamental thing to know when you're gonna go into more
Yeah.
detail.
So for the first clear timing, you know, OFG Scythe, you know that guy?
Yeah, definitely.
That's the he did the video about the like you know the 15 seconds thing,
Um,
like differentiating between single target and multi target, what they're clearing, and then you can like
oh, okay, okay.
estimate what time they'll be at top lane.
Yep. I haven't seen the video, but
That's
I
what
mean, it
I
makes perfect sense.
okay. Yeah, okay.
That's what I do as well. Is like just that doesn't you know the different jungle routes, so you just gotta estimate how long it takes and when they'll get there. That's exactly right. There's no other way to put it. And then you know as well, like jungle routes tend to be a little bit sticky in a way that if you were to do a full clear, then you're kind of promoted to do somewhat of a full clear next time, maybe like a half clear or something. But you can't if you wanted to do wolves on your second clear, you need to wait until all those camps are up first. So
Yeah, I'm not good with jungle clearing.
fair enough. But
I'll
it's like,
usually just full clear over and over again
oh, okay, oh,
for
okay,
like Karthus,
yeah,
like
cards.
the
Even with
timing, if you know
Cartus,
what I mean.
yeah, even with Cartus, like there's this guy called Be Humble Friends that kind of plays like that, so you can get to high elo by full clearing, but it's not the best strategy. It's not like the easiest and it's not the best, but you can like it's not like you can't climb if you do full clears on Curtis. Um, but yeah, let's just start with like the fact that if you let's say if you did Krugs, Raptors, Wolves, Gromp, then first of all everyone knows once you reach here, like once you read at the end and you come on top of the map, base they can always see whether you took a buff and when, right? You can always see the timer if you click on a champion. You can see that little
Yeah, yeah,
square
you
with
see that.
like how far the buff has been gone for. So that's just one really big thing, and you know how much jungle CS you get for every camp?
For
Yep, 4 CS for every single camp, if you clear it
yeah,
at least.
I've played like for a few years, so I
Yeah,
played when tracking was about like 10 for Krugs or something like that.
I think
Before it was 4 CS per camp.
yeah. I think it's 11, right, for Krugs.
I don't know. It's been a while.
Hehe. All right, fair enough, fair enough. Yeah. Anyway, so that's fair. And if you look at it now, so it's just 4, so you know that, let's say, for example, if someone did their both, like, a true full clear, like all 6 camps, you know they get 24. If you kind of know they had a scuttle in there as well, like, you know, let's say, if they have 24 and they did a scuttle, but they also did both buffs, they left the camp up somewhere. Often that's going to be something on the end points, right? Like, there's not
Yeah.
a lot of people that will skip, like, that will go Krugs and skip their Raptors. and go to wolves? It's possible, but it doesn't happen a lot. Why not skip the wolves instead then? Anyway, so Xin Zhao, for example, to do a 3-camp clear. So let's say blue, wolves, and then red. And then the timer is what?
So that's like a leash on blue.
Without a leash.
So I say I'll give him 15 seconds for blue, if that's okay, and then 15 seconds for wolves, and 10 seconds extra for walking to red, and then I don't know, 10 to 15 on the red.
Okay, so you're thinking that would take about 1 minute. Or what is it, like 55 seconds, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be, as far as I know, that would be faster than the record, but not by a lot, only by 4 seconds. The best I've done, I know 2:29 is possible, but without a clear, it's like pretty much 2:30. And if you look at any random player in gold, it's usually, let's say, more like 2:45 or 2:40 or like... even 2:35 is not something most people get without actually practicing the routes and actually perfecting the mechanics. So 2:40 is like more standard than this, but this is if you're essentially just doing it like Tarzan would. So,
Okay.
and then if you do an extra camp, that turns into, let's say, 45 or 2:47. Let's say on champions like Kane, for example, you can still do a 4-camp clear and hit someone before 3 minutes, right? Because you can essentially you can do the clear and let's say 2:45 is still possible, because it's possible in Xin Sao and Kane is faster. And
that's the in-game time, yeah.
Yeah.
2:45.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not the entire. Yeah. Sorry. So like the route would take 1 minute here and 1:15 here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's getting a little cluttered, but the point is, you can get ganked with 3 or 4 camp clears depending on the jungler and the clear speed. 3-4 camp clear means gank happens before the slow push ends. And that's a 3-wave push.
What,
right?
like slow push first wave, shove second wave? Or is that wrong?
That would be, so you just keep it in the middle for the first one, then you start pushing it a little bit for the second one, and the third one you shove in completely. That would be the most standard way of doing the 3-wave push.
Okay.
So, you know, when do these minions arrive over here?
No. Probably around 125.
It is 1:30. And then the second one is 2:00. So Riot is giving you really easy timers, luckily. And then...
Yeah, it takes 30 seconds for the outside lanes.
Alright. So since this
And
is a
they
cannon
spawn
wave,
every
right?
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Yep.
So since this is a cannon wave, that's really beneficial if you get to shove that, because it creates a bigger time buffer, since a cannon takes very long to kill. So like if you already have a huge wave and you kill a cannon, then he's got to deal with it. Your opponent, you have a really nice timer to like invade someone's jungle and potentially screw with him if he goes for a full clear, because the full clear is only gonna hit after 3 minutes.
Okay.
So that's a really nice timer to like see what's up. Like, because if you even if someone's already done a certain camp, then you know they didn't do a full clear, because there's no way they can do a full clear in just 3 minutes. Like on Nunu, it takes like 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and that's a pretty fast one. That's my record. Like that would take most people a lot longer, like more than 10 seconds longer. So 3:30 full clear, that's pretty damn fast. Alright, so that means like before this is the 4th wave, and you want to make sure that you hit the turret right before this minion wave arrives. So you're usually done with a slow push at like 250 or something like that. The earlier the better. Does that make sense? And that gives you essentially the connection. So this is kind of like, so if you have the a super fast four camp clear, you might catch them on the fourth camp, you might not. So the four camp, you're a little bit late, and then let's say for example a 5 camp clear, you're usually already early, like you're on time. Right, so full clear as well.
You're on what?
You're essentially on time to get them in the jungle, like to scout them out, maybe kill them. A lot of people who do a 5 camp clear are gonna be low, right?
Okay.
This is like how you can get a, like if people, let's say if people start smurfing in low elo, what you'll notice, obviously the trades are a big deal, but if one person just chooses to back off and let someone slow push, this is where you can really screw people over. Because, like, not a whole lot of junglers are going to know these exact timings, and not a lot of laners are going to know these exact timings, so you can just walk in there, nobody wards, like, very rarely people ward, and if they do, it's still a sound decision, but if they don't ward, they might die on their camp, for example. Just that game I ended in 14 minutes. I finished a slow push, went and warded this, and it turns out Rek'Sai did a full clear into his top side. And what happens when he does a full clear, he's 25% HP. But he doesn't know this is warded. So what I do is...
Rek'Sai's a girl.
Sorry?
Rek'Sai's a girl.
Did I just misgender someone? Did I say he?
I don't give a fuck. I'm just saying.
Am I being recorded? Nah, just kidding. But yeah, alright. She did a 4 camp clear. Or like the full bottom side clear. So she is below 25% HP. And then you can just loop in. I was running out of time, so I had to go straight in here. So I just took over the blue. If you can also loop in from the back and actually kill someone, because they can't move anywhere. So if your mid laner's paying attention and walks towards here, then they can't flash. Doesn't always happen, but at least you still get the camp in the flash.
Yep.
This is just a lot of stuff. This is like... It's just a few timers that work in conjunction with one another. Well, once you know them, you'll never forget them, and you can use them every game. It's like, if you know it takes about 15 seconds to clear blue, that's 145. Without Elise, it takes slightly longer. So, 145, when does this respawn?
When is what?
When does the blue respawn? If you kill it at 145?
6:45.
Yeah, 6:45. And then you get to the wolves. You said that would take probably about 50 more seconds. Maybe a little longer, but let's say you're there at 2:05 or something. That would be 20 seconds. Then when does it respawn?
6:05. Wait. It takes that long to get there?
To kill it. Because you gotta walk from the blue buff for a few seconds, and then you gotta kill the entire camp.
Yeah.
I think my timer on Xin Zhao is like 2:05.
7:05. I don't know why I called it 6:05. I guess I like even numbers.
Wait a second. Wait, sorry, I didn't get that.
Did you? I'm a retard. It's 4:35.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I thought you said red camp, like, because the who's on the red, and I was just like,
Oh yeah, right. I'm writing now. Oh, so yeah, right. I see how that could be confusing. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So, yeah, that's it. So, 4:35 it is. That's a really big one. And then it gets like you can keep doing that, of course, but the point is pretty clear. You kind of roughly know when they're up. And this is like, most of these timers are going to be hard for you as a laner. But that means, for example, if someone does red into raptors, when do these respawn, these raptors?
Like, after, on the first clear, they start red?
Yeah, and then they go raptors, and then they shoot off.
So we say it takes them until 2:05 again to kill the raptors?
Yeah.
It'll be 4:35.
Yeah. This has to become like kind of like
Can
muscle
mid
memory.
laners deal with this? Like, I know, like a Talon or someone have a look.
Sorry, deal is, and what was the question? Sorry.
Would a mid laner
Yeah.
that's like, um, maybe poke the lane out of lane or something
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
back at these timings, would they expect that, if they force someone to back, I don't know, 420 or something, would they expect to go shove in the wave and go look to one of the camps for the
Possibly.
jungler? Does that,
Like that
or
would
would they
make a
just ward
depends,
because
right?
then maybe they don't have any mana or something? Kill them.
It depends. It's like sometimes you can place a ward over here. If it's like if you're Talon or something, then you can get a lot of kills from the junglers coming in. If you're like, I don't know, not every. It also depends on the jungler. If the jungler on this clear is still like super low, it's obviously more potential to kill him. But I mean, it would usually you won't have the time to clear the entire camp or whatever as a mid laner. But just the ward itself is really big. Because that kind of allows, as well as like if you're as a mid laner not always capable of doing something, the jungler can often just come in here, especially
So
if the
what's the are there like any junglers that would even get back to their second, like they'd get back to their second camp on time, right? Well, Raptors. So what would they end up going to Krugs first if they didn't kill it in the first clear?
mm,
Like,
yeah, I mean, it depends on where you want to go. And if you already know you want to enter top lane, it would make sense to go there through your Krugs. But usually, if you want to be on the center of the map, then which is most common, right? Then it would make sense to move like this. Obviously, like I there's some general concepts that people give different names, but it's like Krugs tend to be Krugs tend to be the end points of a route or like the Gromp, right? Because they're on the sides, and then
hmm
camps like Wolves and Raptors are kind of points where you can rotate around and go in different directions. So like from here you could potentially go anywhere where you wanted to. Like you could go mid lane, bot lane, top lane. You could just cross river through top lane directly. So you could literally go anywhere from your Raptor camp. And on Krugs, it's like who's gonna go Krugs to like I don't know like enemy Raptors. That's a pretty big commitment. You can only do that if you know that you can get something there. It's not like when it's 50-50, you're not gonna do that. It would make a lot more
so
sense. Yeah,
so
yeah.
you can fuck with the enemy jungler if
Hmm.
they turn out to be doing a full clear. You can fuck with them if you got the three wave in and
Yeah.
you're not getting like raped at top.
Hmm.
But can you do anything on the second clear if they're like higher HP? Is that just champion specific?
Yeah, that's champion
Does it
specific.
depend on what your jungler is doing as well?
Yeah, exactly, right? If you got like a two
Okay.
man sitting in this brush and you know someone's just doing full clears and he's gonna come into this like in just 10 seconds or so, then sure, right? Like if you just maybe three man with your mid laner, I've never seen that in solo queue, but in competitive play, especially in lower elo competitive play, that's the kind of stuff that can distinguish teams. So it's all about
Okay.
creative ways of trying to abuse people in the different sections. It's like you got the lanes, of course, but the jungle is another section entirely that you can just abuse. So yeah, it's like if
Okay.
you got to look. It's like the game really isn't like a 1v1 game in the top lane. It's usually looked at it that way, but if you notice like in pro play, for example, you notice that a jungler who sees that someone's pushing already knows that he's gonna grab priority at 3 minutes and be able to go to scuttle if he needs to. While like in solo queue, half of the people know what a slow push is, but they don't know exactly when this wave hits, and they don't know exactly. Not everyone knows the scuttle is at 3:15, and they might not know. They might not estimate correctly how quick this wave travels, and so they might just end up over here at like 3 minutes, and then they have to clear this wave out. Jungler comes in, gets back. before you even do anything. So it requires a little bit of accuracy that doesn't come from trial and error. Or, like, it could. I mean, it only comes from trial and error if you pay a lot of attention to details. Right?
Yeah, which is the one of my problems.
Okay. Fair enough.
Just being just like not um well, I don't pay attention to enough things is one thing, but I don't pay attention to enough resources and try to apply them.
Okay, okay.
So then I won't like notice things by myself. I'll have to hear it from multiple sources.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Fair enough, fair enough. Alright, I mean, okay. So from this point, um, let me think about another topic, because this is most of tracking. It's like, obviously, just some other things to point out. Obviously, if you know someone's looking for, like, let's say mid laners quarter HP, you know they're probably gonna gank. Sometimes you as a laner can set up counter ganks, whatever, right? It's just general concepts like that. But it's a little.
Remember what you said about the you see where the red T is on the map? Like,
Yeah.
nah, not there. Like when the wave gets there, when you try to push in the third wave, is that what you meant? Like, and that's why the top laner can't go down into the scuttle? Because instead of pushing it all the way in, it only got to there?
Yeah, for example, yeah. So, like, not
Yeah, so,
finishing a slow
okay.
push is a very common thing. I try to teach slow
Yeah,
pushing on my lower elo teams, and
I've noticed I've fucked that up, and it's just so bad. Because usually if I get it into there at that point of the game, the enemy laner won't want to like engage into me and then like um, damage my minions or anything in the process. So then the wave gets stuck there as I like desperately try to push it in, or like because then I just like froze it for them. If you know what I mean.
yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
how to like. I don't. It doesn't happen often, but I don't know why it happens when it does happen. If you know what I mean.
Okay. I mean, if you so at the start of every wave, like especially at the start of a certain wave, you can, especially when it hits in the center, for example, you can say, "What's my wave strategy gonna be like?" Like, does it make any sense? For example, I explained a lot about slow pushing. You get like a big time buffer, right? So which you can use for priorities, and obviously you have support by your minion wave. That's a really big one for trades, right? So let's say people that want to extend trades, you kind of get a buffer against like the extended trade because you have a big minion wave, and you also get early levels, right? So you don't get more experience, you just get earlier experience. So your level ups are earlier, right?
Yes.
And eventually you run out of space. So there's some disadvantages. You're usually in dangerous position towards the end section, so it's easy to gank if you don't actually see it coming. But the point is, you have the pros and cons. Like, let's say the position is like a pretty big disadvantage. Okay. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Google. Alright. So, let's just take an example. Someone I coached recently was playing... What was it? Let me think about it. Let me think about it. I gotta look at my history here. It was against Karma. Oh my god. I gotta... If I remember the matchup, it's gonna work. Like, it's... I know it was... I know who it was. Let me just think for 1 second. I know it was Karma versus... Yeah, Cho'Gath. That's who it was. And it's level 1. Question is, who needs to push into whom and why?
So, if Karma does push, and get it in and bounce and then try to freeze. I feel like she can zone super well because she can set up with the jungler really well.
Okay.
Cho would have pushed. I mean, Karma pushing as well means that for those scuttle things, she can help her jungler because she's good in 2v2s. At least I think she is. Cho'Gath, if he were to push. I don't know what Cho'Gath's like good with, but he's a tank with low mobility, so he can just try let Karma push into him. And then if he gets pushed into, he can try hold the wave.
Okay.
So I'd say Karma maybe. She's more escapability. Can maybe help her jungler more.
Okay. And what happens if Cho'Gath starts pushing on his own, like on level 1?
So it's pushing, he'll get poked, and then he can't retaliate getting poked by Karma as she free farms under tower, I guess. Wait, he can use his Q to poke while she's under tower, but then that means he has no CC for if he gets ganked.
Okay.
Um,
All right. I think so.
He gets pressure. He can go down to the scuttle as well.
Yeah.
But
I mean, obviously, the execution makes a bit of a difference sometimes to what actually ends up working in a particular elo, but in high elo, that this tactic would be pretty set in stone. So we'll just go over it from that perspective. So let's just start out with the lane in isolation. You just think about the space between the space in lane like this. Who benefits? Who benefits when the wave is in this position, level 1?
level 1.
Yeah, who will get ahead if the wave were to stay here forever at level 1? I'll give you a hint.
I think Karma can keep poking him, but I don't know
Yeah, Karma has
how
poke,
much
right?
she gains.
Karma has poke. Karma has ranged auto attacks at level 1 are a huge resource, right? Like they're a huge resource. Usually, if you're melee range, it means that you have stronger abilities to compensate for it. So anyone with ranged usually are also scaling champions. Like there's not a lot of level 1 champions that peak level 3. Like let's say Renekton, for example, peaks at level 3. Cho'Gath all in, Irelia all in. There's a lot of melee champions that have some form of all in at level 3. So like all in the video game usually also corresponds with like some level of level 3 because that's when you have all your abilities except ult. And
Wait, but for what I said about Karma freezing, aren't Cho's abilities like good for breaking a freeze
yes,
anyway?
yeah,
So maybe that might not be the best to try always freeze into him.
right.
But that might just be the best thing to do anyway. So
Karma can maybe sometimes Karma can try and hold a freeze for a bit, and then the question is who uses up more resources while that happens. It's like Karma, usually these ranged champions, they want to poke someone out as much as they can all the time, and then whether the wave is bouncing into them or the enemy doesn't matter as much as long as they chunk someone out as much as they can. So if they're bouncing, yes, sir,
so
yeah,
for a
go ahead.
ranged champion like Karma, is she good at harassing the enemy laner while they're under tower? Is she good at that?
Yeah, I mean generally, yeah. It's like you can't always do it, but it's
So
like
I'm
something
thinking
you go for.
like I don't know, bot lane poke comps where they poke the enemy champion under tower? Is that like a thing that top laners can do?
Yeah, for sure, of course. Of course, yeah. If I'm playing Gnar, for example, I'm always thinking, do I actually need to do something in jungle, maybe deep ward, blah blah blah, or can I just keep poking someone under turret? I mean, if I can, then why not? So yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then what this means is level 1 karma, level 2 still karma.
So she wants to be pushing because she will always have lane priority because she's ranked.
Well, if you think about it, karma, if karma's gonna push, eventually the wave is gonna go here. And if Cho'Gath pushes really hard and she can't hold it, then the wave's gonna end up over here. She wants to keep it within this range, right?
Okay.
Like this is her optimal range, and this is certainly not. Like obviously under turret, like if you push a big wave under turret, that's an advantage on its own. But just in general, she's going to have most chances to poke and do stuff in essentially the further towards this start of the lane. That's essentially the principle of freezing, right? That you're in control, and you're more in control, or like you benefit more if it's close to your turret, because that's obviously where you're safe, the enemy's in danger, everything like that. So karma, if you think about karma, she will usually, if you look at, for example, Orianna versus Aurelia as well. This is the exact same matchup, level 3 all in, blah blah blah. Orianna will push, but Orianna will push as slowly as possible and focus on trading with the Aurelia and poking. And the Karma, it's the same thing. The focus is purely on trading and poking and making sure that at level 3 she can't be all in.
So, would the like measuring how successful the poke was be if it's successful that she won't be at, even if Cho tried to all in or Aurelia tried to all in at level 3,
Yeah.
that it just wouldn't work because they're too low on resources?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that is the
Or
exact thing.
would it would also be like about the amount that she has, like her positioning, to not let the level 3 happen, or is
I mean, that
the
happens if
poke
you failed, right?
to stop it?
Yeah, I mean, ideally you want to levels 1 and 2, you just want to poke as much as you can, and at the end there, at level 3, you should be in a position where you can't get all in anymore. But if you failed, then obviously you're gonna have to watch yourself. And if you saw it coming, like you knew that you were on the side of failing, maybe you can steer it a little bit. Let's say, for example, you can try and let someone bounce into you really hard. The harder someone pushes into you, if you want to have the wave under your turret, then the harder a push is, the faster it gets there, of course, that's better. And if you, for example, on the other hand, want to keep the wave in this section as long as you can, you don't really want to push, you want to just keep it here. The thing is, if Cho'Gath wants to... So you have, like, essentially the lane is divided in a couple of segments, you could say. You could say it's divided in 4 or 5 segments. And 2 of them are like the danger zones for one side and safety zones for another, outside of turret. The one is in the middle, and then there's the turrets, of course, the turret zones. And if you think about it, wave management is all about figuring out where both sides want it to be, and then figuring out like who controls where it ends up as a consequence. Because in this case, Karma just wants it, like, doesn't really care if it's over here. Let me put that in a different color, because this is gonna get really hairy otherwise. So let's just put Karma in blue. Like, she doesn't really care if it's over here, or if it's over here, or if it's over here, as long as she has a zonal threat, which comes from poking. So this is conditional. Like, at level 3, it's gonna change, but at level 1, she doesn't really care. As long as it's not hitting her, this would be, like, still fine, and this would just make no sense. Like, it's not something she wants. On the other end, like Cho'Gath is just getting poked the hell out of that lane, right? So the faster this ends up in his turret, the better, assuming Karma pokes a lot. If Karma doesn't poke a lot, it's going to change. But if Cho'Gath loses this matchup, right, he kind of wants it over here at his turret. And if there's a gank... So, a lot of these states are conditional. Now, what if Cho'Gath, let's say Karma fails, I'm running out of colors.
Fails to poke or fails to push?
Fails to poke, because the push, whether she pushes one way or another, doesn't matter too much. If level 1 of Cho'Gath starts pushing into her, she can turn that into freeze over here. But Cho'Gath, because Cho'Gath doesn't want to push, he's not going to touch the wave. So what naturally happens is that a successful Karma will simply focus on trading with Cho'Gath, and because Cho'Gath never wants to touch the wave, he's naturally gonna get pushed. So Karma doesn't want to push, it just happens, and she wants to do it as slowly as possible. Because slow means more time in this section before it hits a turret. Does that make sense?
Yes, but yeah.
Because if you think about it, even if you want to poke under turret, the bigger that minion wave is, the easier it is and the longer you can do it. So in all cases, you want a slow push. Like, she wants as slow as she can. She doesn't really want to auto the minion without killing it.
Level 1?
Yeah.
Only? Or does that keep going?
That depends. So that's gonna depend on how the lane goes. Let's say in the game that I spectated, like I've seen some high elo Oriana versus Aurelia ones, but the Karma versus Cho was in Silver Gold. So in that one, Karma didn't barely poke the Cho'Gath and just pushed like 2 waves instead of 3, and he just gets free minions. Then he starts bouncing, and we'll talk about what happens then later. But let's just first start out with the Karma. Like, let's say it's a failed Karma, right? So failed Karma means that she didn't poke.
Poor Karma.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm just saying, let's say failure would be if Cho'Gath is almost full HP. You can figure out the specifics in-game, right? Like, you have to practice, and every single patch it's going to change. Like, if Karma gets nerfed, everything changes, right? But the general concept is going to be, there's going to be some point at which she doesn't poke enough, and it's going to fail. And in that scenario, what happens is failed Karma kind of wants to wave over here. Or once it completed the push and just wants to leave. She wants to avoid having the lane happen. You know what I mean? Like, she doesn't want to be in the center of the lane. Just she has to constantly position defensively and give up CS. If she failed, right?
Yeah.
And so Cho'Gath, if in this case, Cho'Gath obviously just wants the exact opposite. It's not always the case. But yeah, it's like in this case, Cho'Gath just wants a level 3 all-in, and if you have enough of a health advantage, what that means, essentially, is that you can all-in someone on the turret. So if you got
Does he hit level 3 while she gets the big wave under tower? Is that when he hits level 3? Is that wave, right?
Yeah. Like, let's say before, like, 1 minion before the cannon.
Wouldn't there still, like, be minions under tower for when he wants to all-in, so he'll just get targeted by them anyway?
Yeah, but essentially it's like the spike is from level 3 to 5 in this case, right? It's like, you can still, at, let's say, 3 and then 50% to level 4, you can still all-in, and at level 4 you can still all-in, and then usually at level 5 you can still all-in, right? So it's not like you have to do it when you hit level 3. You just have to do it on level 3. The time window is a little bit bigger. So it's like you got like a full minute or whatever, like sometimes more. You just want to... It's like when that bounce happens is a really important moment, because that's when Cho'Gath gets the slow push and also gets his level 3, so he's the one looking for an all-in.
What does the moment of the bounce mean? Does that mean once the wave is out, or like once the wave is into Like,
yeah, once it's going...
what time does the bounce happen?
The bounce, so bounce refers to essentially when you do a slow push. It's if you visualize it
Yeah,
as a wave, it's like the wave bouncing back to the other turret, to the other person's turret, so to Karma's turret in this case. So when that starts to happen, and the turret,
is that when the minions are like no longer in tower range?
yeah,
Is
yeah,
when the
for
bounce
example,
happens.
yeah, that would be a good
Okay.
moment to call it. Yeah, obviously it's not very strict, like it's exactly this time, or like it's just the general slow push against the enemy player that started a slow push before that, and like yeah. So I'd say once the minions have broken free from the turret is a good time to say that starts.
So if Karma can help it as she's slow pushing,
Yeah.
um, will that third wave, if even if she's slow pushing as slow as possible, will that always hit the tower and bounce?
You
Because
can do a four. I mean, you can do it slower than three
does
waves if you're
Karma
really.
actually want it? Does Karma actually want it into the tower because of the level 3 like danger? She wants it in the tower because
Usually,
of that danger.
I mean, ideal if you're in a 1v1, right? So usually, let's say if I do a Garen versus Garen 1v1 with someone, I don't mind just doing like 5 waves that are just essentially quote unquote frozen. The freeze doesn't really matter if there's no junglers and if I don't have a trading disadvantage. Like the freeze, if I'm ahead in lane and I have zonal control, I have a huge wave almost under the enemy turret. I don't mind if it never completes. But in the real game, right, here we're talking about the junglers and about deep wards and about like, all these things, all these interactions in the enemy jungle. Those are pretty important. So usually, if your jungler is winning, you can make him win harder. And he can't really gank you when you're almost under the enemy turret anyway. So if your jungler is winning, you can gank on the bounce. And if your jungler is losing, you can help him with priority.
Gank on the bounce.
Yeah, so
What do
like
you?
once this starts bouncing, once this reaches a certain point, jungler can come in and gank.
Oh right, okay.
So it's all about figuring out when your jungler is going to be somewhere. In this case, for example, Master Yi was doing some 4 or 5 camp clear, so he's just here like um, on this bounce because it's well after 3 minutes, like 5 camps, especially let's say like an average clear, because a lot of these times that I use are like top challenger perfect clears is not going to happen a lot in silver, but let's say he arrives 10 seconds after the perfect clear time with 5 camps, that's still on the bounce. Because that's like 340 or whatever. That's like 2 waves after the 3-wave push ended, right? So the 3-wave push ends at 250. So at 350, it would be when a 2-wave push back into the enemy would end, which is a really fast push. A really, really fast push. Because remember that the wave starts in the center of the map, and with a bounce it starts at the enemy turret. So you have more space to cross with the minions as well. So usually that takes 3 waves. So you can expect that bounce to end after the junglers have already finished like full clears, like 425 or whatever. Does that make sense?
I guess, but like, um, can you put it into like a context of like maybe the Cho versus Karma or something?
Yeah, right. So karma, if
Like that
you,
actions affecting what's happening.
yeah, so let's say your karma does what you ask is, let's say you do a 3-wave push or a 4-wave push. What happens is, if you do a 4-wave push, it only ends at like 3 minutes and 20 seconds or something. And then it takes a while until this starts traveling down. So it takes, like, say, at 350 is when you can get ganked. Or, like, when you can ask your jungler to gank. But the Master Yi is doing a full clear. And he's essentially already in river, let's say, by 340. And he's like, this is barely the start of this. Like, Master Yi is probably gonna be donezo if he does an entire full clear. He did like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then he could be going in here or in here. If he goes for the full clear, he's gonna be lower. So ideally, he would want to gank a little bit earlier, at like somewhere around like 330 or something, like, or 320. Like, he doesn't want to wait around and like do a full clear because he's gonna be low HP. He wants it back. So
Yeah.
this is kind of like his timings are from maybe 4. So it starts at, let's say, 3 minutes, and it ends like at, let's say, 350 or something, or 340. And this kind of starts at like right at towards the end of his clear, like towards the end of when he wants to gank.
So if your jungler is doing one of the full clears and they're gonna be low on health,
Yep. Usually, most junglers, yeah.
and most junglers like to do scuttle, right?
Yeah.
They all like to do scuttle.
Yeah.
So, so if you can get the lane pressure like Karma wants to,
Yeah.
um, with this, so you say like the super late 4-wave push, 4-wave bounce. I mean,
Yeah. 4-wave push. That's fine. Cause it's gonna bounce
and
after
then
that. That's
that is that's when he's gonna be at the scuttle, but he can't gank. Is that when the Karma is looking to walk down into the river for any potential fight in the river, or is she wanting to just let the wave come into it peacefully? Or like
I mean, if
I
you
don't
do
know what goes
wait,
after.
okay, sure. I mean, if you do a 4-wave push, the problem is like in. I mean, in still
The
honestly,
enemy jungler could be there, right? That timing, the enemy jungle could get to you.
they could have already been here. Like usually, if you look at proper routing, if you do like a 3-0 camp clear, and you get at the scuttle like at 313 or something, you start it exactly when it hits, and then you start kiting it away from top lane, right? And you start moving at 320. You're already too late. That thing is done for at like 325 or whatever. You're not gonna walk all this way from here to here in just 5 seconds. So he just gets it and moves out and does his own thing. So you're gonna be too late with the 4-wave push. You want to do 3 waves usually. 3 waves,
Mhm.
it's like 250, and then you get to walk in here, maybe deep ward at 3 minutes, and you can help your jungler. Usually, even if you'd have to walk in here for 10 seconds, usually that doesn't need to happen when some jungler sees you take like priority and it just pisses off to like the other scuttle, for example. But theoretically, you would arrive there in time, right? You would arrive a little bit before it spawns.
So tank junglers usually like full clear, right? First clear,
No,
like
I mean, a lot of
large
the
amount of camps.
the new route is kind of to do Krugs again. Like a lot of people skipped out on it because it's so far away from the entire map. But it's kind of become a thing to do Krugs and then ignore your top side if you need to and just gank first. That's a new strategy that pro players have caught on by now. That was discovered by analysts and stuff. And
So with that and the 3-wave push, where the top laner can leave and fuck with the enemy jungle in the jungle, would a different, like, I don't know, Zinzao or something, like an early game jungler that can skirmish,
yeah.
if that's the right thing to say, um,
Mm-hmm.
would the top laner and jungle start moving into the enemy jungle as they're on the camp there with that,
You mean
like,
after the slow push? So you
if they're
finish this.
if they're yeah, after, like, once the wave's in or something, and then when you said that the top laner can move into the jungle, right,
Yeah.
the enemy jungle,
Yeah.
would that usually be done with your jungler as well?
I mean,
Or could your jungle be full clearing
your
as
jungler
well, and
can
then you can't do
think.
about it?
I mean, think about it. If you think about it right now, if you were to go into an enemy jungle and you meet a full HP level 3 Zhao, maybe that's not gonna end well if you don't have any terrain scaling. But you can visualize that a little bit. Like, what's gonna happen if I meet him over here, over there, etc. You don't have any bomb plants to work with, so you got to be a little careful, a little tactful. You got to look, like, let's say if like mid lane has full priority, you know. Why is this thing moving along with me? Haha. Okay, this is okay. All right, yeah. So if obviously if the mid laner's already on the verge of leaving lane here, they might know you're here or something. You know what I mean? You got to look at the game state at that moment and just determine, like, can I get out of here or not? And if your jungler's already, let's say your jungler, if you ping these things beforehand and you ping a camp, even in solo queue, you get like 80 or 90% cooperation. Because for them it's free money, you know, like it's not like a lot of the badness in solo queue comes from if people are contesting the same resource and, you know, it becomes like a battle of who's the greediest asshole, so to say. But it's like here it's just free money for everyone. So like a lot of junglers, even in gold and silver, will cooperate. And a mid laner might. Mid laners usually in low elo usually are just constantly looking over here. And then you ping them, and then you ping them again, and you ping them again, and ping them again, and then they look and they go. So you gotta realize usually you get like a 5-second delay. But again, you can usually do this with just 2 people. If someone didn't notice you, and they walk in here, they're usually dead. So it's a pretty safe strategy in general, but yeah, you do need to look at which champions, where are they, will I die if person X who's missing would be over here in this brush waiting for me, that kind of stuff. Yes, and that's obviously game to game, right? You just got to look at like, okay, it's a Xerath, but like he's out of mana, so he can't do anything, or he actually has some mana and he has priority. He looks like he's might come over here. You know what I mean? I have terrain scaling, so I can actually hop over and get out. Those are all specific micro plans, right?
So with you going into the enemy's jungle after 3 waves,
Yeah.
is that usually like a solo thing?
I
But
usually
would you
initiate it on
just
my
not
own.
do it? Would you just not do it if your jungler like did some like cleared down to the opposite side of the map, and then your mid didn't have any priority? Would you just not do it, even if like it was a low HP jungler? You just wouldn't bother.
That depends, right? It's like if you know that someone, let's say for example, you have a meta where Graves is strong, or like say Camille top lane. You're Camille top lane and you're level 3, and you know someone else is like potentially half HP or less. Let's see, like, think of any good junglers. For example, like a bad Graves player, someone who doesn't kite the camps just right. Whatever, like, even just scouting, even if you have to scout and leave, it would still be good. Especially if laners have to come in, right? You're wasting the laners' time. But let's say you're Camille and you have terrain scaling that you can use in both directions, then it's completely fine to do it on your own. But if you're, let's say, if I'm Darius, I've died once because I thought I was smart. There's a ward over here, and I walk towards Krugs, and before I actually get here, the top laner cuts me off with the jungler, and I'm completely stuck. And then there's another situation where this exact same thing happens, but they're so low from my poke and stuff and his clear that I just 2v1 them. Again, that's micro planning, right? So you just always gotta look at the situation and just start calculating. If this guy goes here, this guy goes there, I use these abilities, you know, who ends out on top. That's like where the complexity of the game comes in, of course, like why you can't just use a strategy and get challenger. It's like you gotta just take it individual case by case. But the more terrain scaling you have, the easier it is to do it solo. The more priorities or like responsive junglers you have, the easier it becomes, right? Those are just general rules.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Because I'm never walking into the enemy's jungle, like early game at all.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully, like, let me see if I can just. Oh, I don't have the client open, but I can open it pretty easily. I'm quite sure. But yeah, while we wait for that, because that's gonna take a while probably. Yeah. So the pushes, right? There's a lot of conditions, but it's like it always started when we ask ourselves where do we want the wave to be and why, right? And and for example, the junglers and how much you can do there are just an aspect of that, like that determine why you would want the wave to be under the turret at, let's say, 3 minutes, right? If there were no junglers and there's no nothing, then there's no reason to ask Karma, for example, why you would want the wave to crash under Cho'Gath's turret, unless you can freeze it. Well, let's say if we go back to the lane, right? I'll go back to the jungle topic later, but yeah, this is definitely something to keep in mind, and it's gonna take. Sometimes it's like you gotta also, one big thing is to essentially dare to make mistakes, because I've died on these invades sometimes, not like on 50% of them and not on 20%, and like sometimes, very occasionally, I make a little mistake, and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't think about that for a second. One of the biggest things while I was learning this is like, and I'm not that high elo yet, but it's like, I would hope that this is one of my strengths and not my weaknesses, but it's like, one of the most common things that you, for example, you look over here to see exactly when mid lane leaves. Sometimes I'm fighting over here, and that goes on for a bit, and then during that time, the mid laner now has like a stun on me or something, let's say Xerath stun over the wall. While if I actually fight and look, and then keep fighting and look, I know when he's gonna get there, and I might, for example, draw away from the wall and then move away back to safety, whatever, right? Whatever, and just an example. So, observations are one of the biggest things in these kind of skirmishes, because people coming from all angles, different folks, and you want to know when they get there and what to do. That is really just like, the earlier you observe them, the more time you give yourself to go through calculations. So, for example, if you know Raptor is respawn at 4:35, it's in your brain before the game even starts, and you're pushing. You already know, can I get here, or is that already down? 3 minutes, that camp is down. It should be down. Maybe it's not, but it should be. Right? If you, like, I just had that in, like, a Grandmaster team that I was coaching. This guy, this jungler, it's like 350 or something. And we saw on the ward that that the camp was only taken between 310 and 330. And he wards it at 350. That ward expires in 90 seconds. So well before this camp respawns at, like, what is it, let's say 6 minutes ago, this ward is already expired. So all these micro plans just come from, like, the fact that even in high elo, sometimes people don't know these things by heart. And then you gotta think about it, and then you're too late because you got other stuff to worry about. You only got a few seconds here when you get here. So this is something I wanted to give you. Like, a lot of whether you can implement this in game comes to how much time you give yourself to, let's say, for example, observe things and then evaluate them. And if you try and do it in 1 second, it's like, you know, that's when you would need to be faker, so to say, you know, like to actually do that in 1 second. I can't do that. Does that make sense?
But what can you do if you're the one that's being pushed in? What could you do there? What's your goal? Just sit on the tower, keep the farm up. When it bounces, when it bounces, are you meant to try get it into tower as fast so that you don't get ganked, or is that first timing after the bounce too dangerous to push because the jungler, well,
I mean,
the jungler, if clearing upwards, would be in that area, so that you might want to just let the first wave slow push and then try pushing in.
I mean, if you're, for example, the problem is, if you, let's say you're Cho'Gath and you try to push, the problem is that Karma can always match it and take over. So Karma can always thin it down to a point where it's not a substantial push at all. She has wave control, because the wave control comes from one of two things: either your zonal control or your wave clear. So let's say if you were able to clear the wave in 1 second when you reach the center of the lane, then it doesn't matter if someone has, like, a zone that at least is some control. Like, let's say it deals 200 damage per second. If you only have to tank it for 1 second, the wave's gone. But in the real game, it doesn't work like that. So, since you push slowly, you're not going to be able to essentially do anything if you don't have zonal control around you. So, like, if Karma is just, like, standing over here and she controls this entire area, you can't go over here for like 3 minutes or whatever, like not 3 minutes, but like you can't go stay in that range and tank it for like 90 seconds straight. That's a huge problem. Once you're slow pushing and you have levels, you might be able to do that. But at the start, it's kind of wasted effort. What will happen if you do that is that you don't actually finish the slow push. It's never gonna get here if Karma doesn't allow it to happen. So, you actually want it under your turret. And Karma wants it essentially like in the center of the lane. So Karma is gonna try and push it as slowly as possible, and you want it to go into you, so you're not pushing it at all either. So this wave just sits in the center while Karma zones you, and then sometimes you just take a trade to get a CS, right, or whatever, but it's gonna push into you. Do you see what I mean? It's like, so you don't want it.
So it's always just gonna push into you if you're versus a poke champ.
Yeah, it should. It should. If you look at pro play, if you look at Orianna versus Aurelia, for example, unless the matchup is misplayed, it's like always Orianna who's going to not actually push the wave herself, but who will end up slow pushing because she applies zonal control, and she's the one trading with the Aurelia like actively. So that tends to happen. And then the reason you don't want to slow push usually is because the distance here, like this distance here, is where you get stomped. So you can only do that when you have a lot of wave clear, you know? Like if you already want a base and you're gonna, let's say you're 80% HP and you're gonna drop all the way to here, but you know you're gonna base anyway, then why not? As long as you can't get killed. If you know the jungler's not here and she can't run you down or whatever, then it doesn't matter if you go on base. But at level 1, you want to keep your full resource bar as much as you can for level 3. That's what you're going for. You're going for that level 3, and the way you get there is with like 80+% HP. And all the time you're in between these areas, you're dropping HP to the poke. So you want her to push as hard as she can. Does that make sense?
But in melee versus melee, like Renekton and Darius.
Yeah.
On Tryndamere, I probably execute it wrong, but I usually will just auto lose any trade I take with them in the early waves.
Okay. I mean,
and letting it push into me, I'm giving up a very large amount of farm. And I don't know how I'm meant to get that farm.
I mean, there's matchups where you can contest a wave, and you might lose, you might get whittled down over time, but at least you're getting more back than you're losing in other terms. So let's say, if you get 20 CS and base, that might be better than if you stay full health, don't have the base, but you only got 5 CS. Because by the time you get back from base, you might have lost something, but maybe not 15 CS if you didn't lose that many, like that much experience, for example. And the worst case scenario is if you give up CS and then you still get to a point where it bounces and you get frozen on and you just can't get any CS at any point, can't get the experience. If you were base, you're screwed, and it just kind of spirals out of control like that. So oftentimes it's pretty exceptional that you don't want to contest a wave or not trade at all. You want someone like Orianna or Karma to push as hard as she can, but that's not by not doing anything. Like, for example, if I'm Alistar, I should contest a wave and take some trades and whatever, but in low elo, usually I can just stand under my turret and the enemy will push it anyway. So, gotta keep that in mind. But, I mean, if you're up against Karma, right, as Cho'Gath, for example, the worst thing you can do is trade with Karma when she's on top of her minions. So you can take some trades sometimes and put your abilities on cooldown. But you don't want to push. And you want to promote her to push into you. It's like, if you can whittle her down, obviously your all-in becomes easier as well. So it's not like I'm saying you can't trade, but Karma generally does want the wave in the center, and you generally don't want it in the center. It's just like, while it's in the center, I'm not saying that you can't play the game. You then generally do want to use your cooldowns and trade a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but for melee versus melee, for the losing melee, what retaliation do they have? Is it just depending on the execution of the other player, what they can do in the lane, if they can hit them back?
I mean, it depends on the matchup, right? Like, it's like, for example, in Karma versus Joe, you have a pretty clear change in the lane from, like, one person poking the other to the other threatening to all in the other, right? In Darius versus Renekton, it's a little bit different. The trading mechanism doesn't revolve.
I meant like
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
into champions like Darius or Renekton.
Yeah.
Like, as in, for Darius, my impression is if I try to fight him before he's level 3, he'll beat me, and if I fight him after, he'll beat me.
Yeah. That's
If I
why,
try
like,
to take extended. So I don't know how
yeah,
the change between level 1 and level 3 actually happens.
yeah. It doesn't always happen like that. I'll go into like the part. Like, I'll just describe it here, like how a matchup like that works, because it's different. It's not like as clear as something generic like poke versus all in. Those are generally the most crystal clear ones with like this level there's this power spike and then you win, and you know, it's like level 6 Cho'Gath gets all and Karma gets absolutely nothing, hooray. But obviously that doesn't happen in Darius versus I'm just gonna take Darius versus Renekton because it's a really clear, like, really clear matchup, like a clear
What
idea.
about Tryndamere? Where does he fit in
um
that? What's
Tryndamere
his
would be
purpose?
Tryndamere is like, the thing with Tryndamere and Renekton is that rather than just thinking about where they want the wave to be, they also have to consider they get fury. They get like a resource from the minion wave from attacking it. So players like Tryndamere usually benefit from just killing off waves and just pushing, obviously. And then once you get full fury, obviously you can just stop pushing and just apply your zonal control. But let's say against the Darius, it's a little bit similar, as a Renekton will play against it. It's, it's like in terms of a Renekton is better at facilitating ganks and stuff, while Tryndamere would be better in like the isolated 1v1 against Darius. It's like we'll get into how exactly you can play any of these matches. Obviously, it's like I could analyze any matchup. I haven't played all of them, obviously. But yeah, that's like the matchup between Renekton and Tryndamere versus Darius would be similar, because Darius is a Juggernaut, and Renekton and Tryndamere both have like a pretty big, large spacing tool, and that kind of determines most of how they interact with one another. That like no escapes, no spacing versus pretty big spacing, and then the question is how do you use it, how do you play it? Just one second.
Okay.
All right, so I'll just go over, like, I'll just show you just for 1 second, right? Just like as the example of Renekton, because it's easier. Like we can always go to another champion like Tryndamere, but like usually the most common thing is that both sides go like QWE, and if Renekton wants to go defensive, he can also go QE. Darius can go QE. Darius can start W, and then go E. There's all sorts of variations, but these are the most common ones, like the ones on top. And it's like, if you think about level 1, how big do you think, let's say, Renekton's W versus his Q, which one does more early on?
Renekton's W versus his Q.
Yeah, like how do these abilities synergize and how strong are they individually?
I mean, his his W is an auto reset, but he can also just use his Q instantly after an auto as well, right?
Yeah, you can use it at
So,
any
like,
time. In animation
I
locks
don't
him, it
know,
doesn't.
his Q heals him as well, but it also damages the wave. But,
Yeah, so
I
Q.
think Q's better because it gives him more health, so it's like more effective damage. I don't know if that's how you'd say it, because
Okay.
it gives him while taking away health from the enemy.
Usually, I mean, if you're up against a Renekton, do you try and fight him level 1, 2, or 3? Just generally, right? Maybe you're Tryndamere, maybe you're another champion, but if you just think about Renekton levels 1, 2, and 3, when does he spike?
Um, I think level 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like if you look at it, W and E synergize really well, and his Q is kind of just like the reason you take it level 1 is because if you only have one of these two abilities, they don't really do anything. You gotta get them in combination with one another. So, because of that, you get this level 1, this level 2, and this level 3. This ability, I mean, W in terms of damage, vastly does more than anything else in his kit. But the thing is that he can't start it because he doesn't have a way of actually properly trading yet. So it's just better to go with the sustain. And if you look at Renekton, right? So Renekton peaks level 3. At level 1, 2, 3, how do you feel about Darius?
Darius is strong with his well, his Q gives him sustain, but for the long trades, because of his stacks, his W can extend the trades more.
And his E?
Darius's E can extend the trades more.
Yeah, as well, right? So they both essentially his at level 1 he gets sustain as well. And then he also gets his abilities don't really depend on each other as much. You can get both of these, but like both of these abilities extend trades. And
Yeah.
it kind of means that as you get to level 3, so level 1, level 1 is really like a weak type of juggernaut with like against a strong juggernaut, you could say. Because Darius just does way more damage in the extended trades, does more damage in the short trade as well. His Q does more damage and like sustains relatively more at least than Renekton's Q does without the empowerment. So at the start of Darius to start slow pushing Renekton, he tends to win on like at least level 1, and then usually level 2 as well. Darius versus Renekton is really all about like if you understand the level 3, you understand the other levels as well. But like level 3, the champion types are more defined. So you have like a proper Juggernaut against like a proper all-in champion, like essentially. I mean, I don't really like the class types, like whether you call it the Bruiser or not, but let's call it that for a second, just for clarity. And you know that one of them clearly wants the long trades and the other one wants the short ones. But yeah, that means that Darius tends to win level 1, and then level 3 is a bit of a question mark. But if you think about it, Darius would be very abusable with a jungler. So like Renekton plus jungle is really, really strong. That's like a really big synergy that you want. And that it makes Darius' life a living hell. If you think about it, Renekton has really good ways of selecting a trade window. If Renekton, if we take all of this in, right? If Renekton E's in, and then, for example, auto W's, right? And then E's out, can Darius pull him back in?
Um, Depending on the
Because if I don't know if I have a good example of that, but if you think about, would you agree like that roughly these abilities have the same range? Like Darius E isn't that much longer than one Renekton dash. It's minimalistic difference.
Mm-hmm.
So Darius is stunned until well after Renekton finishes E. So at that point, Renekton's already gone. Assuming that that Renekton was between Darius and the turret. If he has to make a little, like let's say if he were attacking Darius from the top and he's like, he has to loop in a little bit, there's gonna gain a little bit of distance. That's probably not enough, but if you make the angle awkward enough, eventually Darius can just cut him off. Like let's say if Renekton's in a brush and Darius is right next to him, that would be an example where sometimes it's possible. But the buffer is pretty big. It's not close.
Because of the speed of Darius's W, can't he just press W and target Renekton as soon as he sees the dash start? So while Renekton does his auto, Darius would have hit his slow.
That's possible.
And then when Renekton's leaving, he's still slowed and can get pulled in.
The Renekton's E is a constant distance dash. So it doesn't change in... Like, it doesn't change if you're... You can even dash while rooted. Like, you can't start it. You can't channel the ability while rooted. But if you dash and you get rooted, you still keep dashing a constant amount of distance.
But, like, he'll still have slower movement speed than Darius. If you got hit by the slow.
We can look at the timers, but the thing is, by the time that you are, let's say... By the time that Renekton has finished stunning and E-ing away, because that takes a little bit of time, right? It's like auto W and then E. This time frame is like more than half a second. This is a little more than half a second. So if you if you slow him, he's going to be right about getting his movement speed back. The problem is you would need to catch up a lot. It's essentially, if you see it happen, I'll see if we can find a clip of Renekton versus Darius real quick, just as an example. There we go. Because what you mentioned or what you're thinking about is good, right? Because you want to know how this works. This sequence determines how the lane is played. So it's good that you're thinking about it, but it can be treacherous if you're just thinking about, like, let's say, for example, when exactly that slow ends and how much you catch up as a consequence. That can be a little bit hard. Because obviously I might be wrong, who knows? But let's just take
I don't play Renekton, so I don't know.
Alright, yeah, I mean, the thing is you do need to also play against him, so it is very valuable if you know essentially the rough ideas behind every matchup. Even if you haven't played it and you might not have picked up on exactly when you can start running someone down and doing something, but you kind of want to know the general trading sequences. But you don't need to know the matchup itself. Like essentially you could say the trading sequences in a way, determining them is not matchup specific. Like, it might be matchup specific when you want to execute it, how much health, and, you know, like, can Darius, for example, flash E, and then, you know, like, how much damage does he do with the combo? But you do want to, like, know generally how these sequences work out and how you can determine them. But we'll just take a quick look and then see what happens. You see the Renekton going for essentially... This is really funny, right? Who do you think benefits from this trade?
Well, health-wise, it's definitely Darius, but I wasn't paying enough attention, but didn't Darius take minions, so now Darius's wave's pushing? Or is it because now that Renekton's got Fury, his sustain heal actually makes it worth?
His sustain will never give him back the amount of HP he's missing relative to Darius. Because Darius obviously, if Darius can complete a slow push, that's kind of his mission done right there. and if Renekton is still like at an HP disadvantage as well, that's excellent. Those are like 2 main goals in lane that you can accomplish at once in that case. But that's it. Like that's a really big one. But there's another thing to consider. Like what happens before Darius is gonna finish the slow push.
What? Is Nidalee coming? This is before. Wait, what? I don't know.
Right, we'll just take a look. You see what he does here. Why do you think Darius shoved this wave in?
Because he's a gankable champion, so he wants to bounce out before the jungler can get there.
Yeah, this Nidalee. The problem is if Rengar wasn't Rengar, or if Rengar was actually routing topside, this would have been fine. But the problem is that Rengar... This was when the scuttles used to spawn at 2 minutes. So if Rengar actually... Sorry?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they... Like, essentially, if the jungle matchup was favorable, then this would be excellent. And Darius wouldn't have to push. But it's exactly because the Nidalee's over here right now on the blue buff, and she's just gonna come in here and screw him up. So that's why he wants to... You always want to think, like, when can I get ganked? When, like, how can my jungler respond to that? And in low elo, you don't want to assume your jungler will help. You just look at if he actually does it. But in high elo, you can also just, essentially, to an extent, expect someone to make the right move at some point in, like, Challenger. But, yeah, he wants to push it because of the Nidalee. That's right.
Okay.
So in an isolated environment, Renekton would have been considered to really have lost that, because he wouldn't have been able to queue his minions without getting trade from Darius. That's a really big one. Darius wouldn't have allowed him, like he would have only allowed that once the wave reaches under turret, and by that time he's been denied a lot of CS, so then Darius already got the value that he wanted to get out of the push. But he didn't, because of the jungler. And Nidalee goes base. Obviously, I don't... Like, Darius doesn't know, but...
Nidalee base.
Yeah, crazy.
Why does she have a 11 farm?
She's gonna... What she's gonna try and do, I think, is... If I had to assume, he's gonna try and kill Rengar. Because Rengar... There's a ward over here. He hasn't been spotted at almost 3 minutes. Which means he went vertical. But if you go vertical, you're not done with that clear at this moment. Like, you've crossed river, but you haven't been done yet. So, she's probably gonna try and kill... Like, she knows top lane warded, right? So in most cases, let's say in gold, you would have just killed the top laner here and been done with it. And because of this ward, you kind of know where Rengar is. And then sometimes...
The ward by Cassidy.
Yeah.
And then now it's slow pushing into Darius. Darius doesn't want to contest, just in case Nidalee could be there. Since the wave's pushing, he gets denied more.
Yeah, he's completely screwed. Yeah. Like, essentially, he doesn't know that the Nidalee isn't here, right? Like, they don't have that vision. So,
yeah, that's why I don't play, like, unless it's, like, 100%. I try to stay a bit more careful if the wave's pushing to me, because then I'll just get denied way too much.
Fair enough.
If I fuck it up.
Yeah.
So what can Darius do right here? Just let the wave come in?
Yeah, like, Renekton is pushing a little bit unnecessarily hard as well. I don't know.
But then, like, what? Nidalee's top side again. Does Darius...
variables that you don't really know how they pan out if you don't have vision on the jungle. So if I had to guess, I would never have guessed that my enemy jungler is doing Krugs into wolves. It's a really weird sequence, but that's because she was trying to find Rengar, and Rengar instead, I don't know how, but he just abandoned this vertical jungle after doing like Raptors. So maybe he went, for example, Raptors, Scuttle perhaps, or maybe not. Who knows? We don't know. And called it a day.
So could. So how Renekton's moving right now doesn't tell Darius anything about Renekton's jungler. So what? Like Darius can't know anything from what Renekton's doing.
I mean,
'Cause
Renekton was pushing a little bit fast, but I mean, honestly, that's more because he wants to hit this wave and not wait for another wave. Like, if you think about it, Darius knows Nidalee could be topside. He doesn't know that she is, but she could be. And Renekton, does Renekton get threatened in the center of the lane by like Rengar, if like Darius hasn't been contesting the wave?
let's say if Renekton's full HP and then Darius walks up, Rengar walks up through river. Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Renekton isn't really scared of that gank, I don't think.
Yeah, because Darius is so far away that even if he ghosts and maybe even flashes, like Flash can always be met by Flash, of course, but even just by ghosting, like, or if he doesn't, then he doesn't get in range. He just can't make up for all that distance between them. Like, it's just not possible. So that's why he's not afraid of the gank, right? So it's like it's not as telegraphed as when that would be a factor. So you don't care about Rengar in this case. And Renekton does this ward, and this is really this one over the wall here. This is really common one because this is like a position where you position yourself defensively, but you can also reach over the crux. So like if you went over here, then you're putting yourself at risk for a sandwich. That's one that I died. The one that I mentioned where I died at one point. You can sometimes go over this wall, but then you already use your E, and now you're over in this segment. And then if there's a mid laner over here, and there's people coming from here, you're dead. Or you have to flash. You can prevent all of that by just warding from this side. And just using your E. And then you're already into safety.
Okay, so would Renekton have an idea of what Rengar's doing?
We saw him on the camp. That was a little... Just... There we go. See that? That was him.
No, for him to do that ward.
I mean...
Like, would he have known what Nidalee was doing?
We saw that he wasn't on Raptors, right? So we knew that Rengar was vertical jungling, which makes the timers a little bit more difficult, but that means he vertical jungled, and then he didn't show on the ward, so he probably based. We're not sure, but that's very, very likely. He could have also crossed over through mid, maybe, if he had more HP remaining, right? But that means that he probably did Raptors, and probably wanted to do his red, maybe even before that, and Krugs. We don't know in what order he does them. Because if he wants to bolt into top lane, he could start on the Raptors, for example. But usually most people will start on the red buff. That's the safest thing to do. And then it depends on the state of the game, whether you want to stay close to top lane or stay close to mid immediately, right? Like, in terms of efficiency, it's best to do the Krugs first. But you want to make the decision mostly based on where you need to be on the map and not whether it's efficient. Because you'll get both camps anyway, eventually. So what he probably did is red into Krugs. And if he didn't, and Rengar does that ward, Renekton does that ward, then they know when he's going to be on that. And he's going to get harassed really hard. Because Nidalee is really good at evading.
Can we get a pause real quick?
Yeah.
Right, so... This is going to be his first Krugs.
Yeah.
But that ward would last. So, Rengar started red. Did he? Did he start red?
No, he
Or
started
is that what
blue.
you're okay.
He started blue. He started vertical jungling, remember? So he started out like over here, and he made a move not directly, but he ends up clearing like this. And then Italy has two options. She can either clear like this. She knows that as soon as he doesn't pop up on the Raptor ward when he should have been at like 240.
So Renekton's ward is there to um see Rengar on it, not to see like it respawn or anything. It's there to see Rengar.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about the jungler. Like, you know roughly when that camp's gonna be down and when it's gonna be up. It's like 10 seconds difference. Doesn't matter that much. So it's
So
mostly.
does this mean Renekton might play a bit more defensively now? Like
Mm,
as in,
in
or would he get enough vision from his minions that Rengar won't be trying to lane gank him?
He's right
Or
now. He's
did
full HP. Since Rengar can't reach in here, it's like, um, it's because it's bouncing, right? It means that Nidalee is gonna be the one who determines the move here. If Nidalee decided, you know what, I'm done with the scuttle, I'm gonna go gank mid and then go bottom, then Renekton just has to play safe on the bounce. Even just in the 1v1 against Darius, Darius is gonna probably have an advantage. We haven't established that yet, but like I can just say that like generally he's gonna have an advantage on that bounce. Um, yeah, and then especially since if Renekton is already at a disadvantage and can't push the wave, he doesn't get Fury either, so it snowballs. Um, so you got Darius level 5 first. You got Darius with big wave. You got Darius with an offensive summoner spell. Everything Rengar is in the area. But right now, Nidalee's over here, right? So if this guy bounces into him, and Nidalee is the one, like we saw, Rengar is like done with the clear, so he's not a full HP. Nidalee's really good at evading and stuff. Nidalee has electrocute as level 3 or 4, so she can come in here if she wants to. It's up to her. If she does, then Renekton can like take a trade, just like he did at the start, take a trade that loses him more speed than Darius, but then Nidalee should be able to finish him off. Making sure that Darius doesn't get Noxian Might and stuff, but just a good chunk. Right, that's how this plays out, or should play out. Level 1 was the same thing. Nidalee was on blue, and Rengar is completely useless, so he's just not present in top lane, so Nidalee is the one that threatens through the jungle here. So if they scrap to 50%, then Renekton wins, right?
because now he's in a safe position?
Because Nidalee is threatening the Darius. So what Darius did was, in response to this, Darius hard shoved. Darius shoved as hard as he can. Like, he didn't slow push. Darius shoved. And that's because he wants... That's simply because, in this case, the defensive move, you remember the different states? He wants it under his own turret. But this is where he wants it. But right now it's like over here. And it's also pushing to the enemy. So what you do is you just push way harder, and that way it's gonna like, in the short term, it's gonna bounce back. So he needs to be like over here very, very soon. Like Nidalee is already on the way. Like it's just like less than 30 seconds. So this guy needs to just shove this wave as hard as he can and back out. That's what he did. That was what he did after that trade. Even though he won the trade. If the junglers weren't there, he wouldn't have hard shoved. Like if it was just a 1v1 match, there would be no reason to shove the Renekton, right? You just hand him like sustain and minions under his turret.
Yeah, yeah.
So this just constantly like just taking the best trading sequences and where in isolation the players would like the wave to be, and then comparing that to the junglers. In this case, the jungler being Nidalee threatening to go over here or moving away. So right now we're at a verge, right? Because we don't know yet what Nidalee's gonna do. So I don't know that either, right? You just have to wait and see while the wave bounces. But if she does commit to this, if she goes top lane, what does Renekton do?
Well, either way, wouldn't Renekton want to let the bounce happen?
I mean,
Because
you want...
otherwise, Darius can just run him down in the lane with Ghost. He can just run him down. If Renekton doesn't like let it come into him and he puts the wave in an awkward spot near Darius's tower, he can just start running at him.
Right. So if you think
So
about it,
even if the jungler, if Nidalee didn't come, wouldn't he just want it to come to him anyway?
I mean, it's gonna come to him unconditionally. The only question is, how do you behave when that happens? You can slow it down, right? Or you can speed it up. That's one option. That's like one choice you have to make, whether to slow it down or speed the process of the bounce up. Speeding it up means that you're not hitting the minions and you're trying to get Darius to Q you, for example. And slowing it down would be, for example, taking it straight where you Q, empowered Q the minions, for example. If he does the same thing, you kind of need to clear the wave, right?
Would Renekton be assuming that by the time it's about to bounce, Renekton would be assuming that Rengar would be back at his bot side clearing? Is that an okay thing to say?
Wait, who? Rengar, you mean?
Like Renekton would assume that Rengar, by the time the bounce happens, top Rengar will be bot side.
He's on his. Just think. What do you think? Where
Yeah,
is he right
like
now?
after no, when it comes back to Renekton.
Yeah. That's right now, right? So now it's gonna be back.
The bounce when it's actually at his near Renekton's tower.
I mean, at that point, Rengar would have been gone. Yeah, that's gonna be like a minute or so. So then he's been long gone. But right now is when the bounce actually starts happening. Like, once the wave is almost under his turret, it's gonna be so big nobody can stop it anyway. There's no jungle interactions. It's when it starts and when it develops to like the center. That's when the interesting stuff happens. Once it gets beyond that, it's such a huge wave nobody does anything. So like even if Nidalee comes at that point, Darius can just like get some experience and get away. Maybe he misses 3 minions, but he gets a huge time advantage.
Yeah.
So most of the decision making happens before the bounce is almost at Renekton's turret. At that point, Rengar would be expected to be bot lane.
And then what does Renekton want to be doing? Does he want to try freeze it since Nidalee won't be there by the time he can freeze it? Or does he want to let it bounce and then bounce it back into Darius?
What do you think? Can he freeze it?
Not if Darius doesn't let him.
Yeah, no, not at all. Not even close, right? It's out of the universe of possibilities. It's never gonna happen. That would be really weird, because essentially Darius, right, being a juggernaut means that you don't get to make flashy play. Like in a skirmish, maybe you want to be over here at this point, and then you want to be over here at the next, and then you want to be over here, and like there are champions with spacing that can quickly rotate between different areas, right? But Darius just essentially is really good at controlling one space all the time, and that would be an example. Would be the minion wave. That's something Darius is really good at, controlling minion waves. So he's also good at clearing minion waves, like any other juggernaut. So that means he has control. Without the jungle interactions, at least, he has control. He's weak against the jungle ganks, but he can just govern the lane when we know that Rengar and Nidalee are gone. So he can't freeze ever if he's not ahead. Like if Darius gets chunked to 25% HP, that's different, but otherwise he can't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then can Darius freeze Renekton? Or is Renekton's wave clear too good?
They'll probably start scruffing and like trading and stuff happens, and I don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but Darius can try. Darius can definitely try. They're just gonna try and just freeze it for a bit, maybe start slow pushing. Like that's very slow pushes and freezing. That's generally what he wants to do. Yeah. He wants to just, use his time while he's ahead of Renekton to just, with his offensive summoners as well, he would like to get some sort of advantage from a freezer or big slow pushes. So that's his goal, yeah? That would be true. And if you think about it, so if Renekton, if we see Nidalee go into the top side, right? Do you think Renekton has two decisions to make, right? So the first one is slowing down or speeding up the wave, and the second one is what he does to the player, which is trading or just like respecting his zone or playing the zone threat himself. Which one do you think he needs to do when Nidalee's gonna come in here?
Well, I think there's two things he could try. One would be to just not hit the wave and let it come to him as fast as possible. Or maybe somehow bait out Darius's abilities, but then Renekton probably needs to save his abilities for when Nidalee comes, so I don't think trading with Darius is okay.
Nidalee can choose when she comes in, right? Like the time window is very big. So if you think about it, if
Well,
someone's
she'll just sit in the bush.
yeah, she could theoretically sit in there for quite a while. If you know it's gonna kill little Darius or really put him behind in the lane, Nidalee has a lot of time. She doesn't really care about economy. She just wants to start crushing important laners like Darius. So that would be perfect. He's bouncing right now. So the time window at the start of a bounce over here is really, really big. So, and Nidalee doesn't mind the time aspect as well, so she can just sit in this brush if she wants to. So trading is 100% the way to go. You're getting abilities, your cooldowns are generally shorter, especially on the E. His E is much longer than your E or W. And you want to both drop HP, because he's going to be dying to 2v1, not you. So, and if you are already trading and a jungler comes in, he's naturally, if you're losing the trade, he might be walking even deeper into you. So he's only getting himself into more trouble. If you're literally just respecting his zone, right, just like the Darius did on the bounce, if you're walking a billion feet away and a jungler comes in, you gotta telegraph, hey guys, there's a jungler here. You know what I mean?
Can you explain that again?
If Darius, let's say if Rengar tried to gank the Renekton when he was pushing and Darius was 3 flash ranges away, then
Okay.
as soon as Darius walks up and makes it 2 flash ranges and maybe down to 1 and presses Ghost maybe to cross the gap, before that time, if Rengar already showed up when Darius is still 3 flash ranges away, well then Renekton just walks out, right? If Darius, if Renekton only, if Rengar only pops up once Darius has already pressed Ghost and is like pretty close, but you saw him randomly activate Ghost in lane, then you think that's kind of a hint that maybe something's up. That's essentially what I'm saying. It's like
maybe.
yeah, I mean, do you see what? Yeah, exactly, right. So it's telegraphed. It's completely telegraphed. And a lot of people in one of the ways you can climb in silver, gold, and platinum is when you recognize when you're being ganked before it happens. Telegraphing, like registering that, is a really big game aspect. So, not just tracking the jungler, but also being like, hey, wait a second, this guy's taking a horrible trade. I wonder why that is. If someone actually takes losing trades, unless they're just bad players, that should be a signal that they think their jungler is going to get there and like benefit from that trade. So it tells you what the players want to do. That's why Darius knew Nidalee started topside, even if it wasn't shown on the map. He still knew how Darius literally won a trade, and as a response, instead of denying the Renekton, started just hard shoving the wave as fast as he could and just like being really, really defensive on the bounce. That shows you that Darius knew why Renekton took that trade. He knows that this decision is favorable if and only if the jungler is ganking or coming soon.
Because I would never trade that long with a Darius. Level 1. Usually I'd on Tryndamere auto spin out.
Yeah. And that's
Like,
right.
just one auto spin out. Like I wouldn't like if I saw someone do that into Darius, I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
And
That's the right question.
it'd be really suspicious.
Yeah.
Or I'd just be like, this guy's a retard.
Yeah, and then low healer, you're right.
Depending on what happens next.
Yeah. And then
But
what you do is, in
I'm
this case, you can't... You gotta realize that you can't really do Renekton strategy in Silver or Gold yet. It is better to just take winning trades most of the time. So it's not like you can instantly start applying this, because it does assume Nidalee is watching you and notices you trade and notices how low Darius is and if he's pushing. And in Silver, most people, if they start blue, they're gonna blindly walk to their wolves, they're gonna blindly walk to the red buff, or blindly walk into the enemy jungle. If it's like a player that says, I'm really good at invading, they are gonna invade before the game's even started. They already have that written down. But so you can't really assume.
Commit to the clear that they've already decided to do.
Yeah, that happens a lot. They don't even look like. Let's say maybe they're gonna look bot lane, because that's where they're like, okay, I'm gonna move bot lane. I just want to know how quick. Even though they're top lane right now, and they could say, oh, top lane actually just got traded, was trading and got to half HP. Actually, I can go over there. That's since that usually doesn't happen. You can't rely on this strategy in lower area yet. But you do need to understand it. You need to understand how it works and how it affects, like the players on different parts of the ladder.
What do you mean, this strategy?
The strategy of trading disadvantageously in order to essentially get someone to gank.
Okay, like how you step up into Darius, and then since you take a bad trade, like saying that you've got a jungler coming in, you walk up, and then all of a sudden he just like pops Ghost and starts using all his abilities on you as your jungler's coming, and the only reason you walked up is because you're a jungler. He's not reading the situation properly.
Yeah.
And then that's why he's the low elo player.
Yeah, exactly. So usually what he does, like what Renekton does, is not advised to do in your own games. But if you see an enemy take a bad trade, you should like start stretching your ears as you get higher on the ladder as well. Like that, and yeah, you just gotta take it into a little bit of context. Like, it's obviously better to take the safe choice. Sometimes you walk out of a situation because you think you're being ganked, and I'm like, wait a second, this guy's bot lane. And I'm like, wait, what? He's just killing himself? That will happen, right? And that's completely fine.
I think for me, if I was in that Darius's position, I would have probably been sketched out, but I probably would have, instead of focusing on the immediate shove, I probably would have just warded and then went to shove, which may be the difference between dying there and not.
If
I actually went to ward.
If you have a really big slow push, right? If you got like, let's say you got a 3-wave push and you got like a really big wave stacked up at this point, then, and you also have the cannon, like, and you have that pushing down, and let's say there's 3 minions remaining. Sometimes, let's say you can get the casters. Those are not casters in my story, but let's say you already got the casters, the melees are still up, and you kind of just go to the edge of experience range, and you have a ward, for example, and you know that if you went to the minion wave right now, then you might die. But you know that if you spot him on a ward and then you move away from your experience range and just give up these 3 minions, then you're gonna live. Then what happens is this wave is still gonna reach the turret and complete the push. You just lose a few minions, but you get everything you wanted.
So would you say in that situation you save a ward and you don't deny yourself minions if you shove that in? Because if you don't shove it in, you place the ward and see the jungler. You have to leave, deny yourself minions,
the
and
ward is
then
generally
use up a
placed.
ward.
I mean, the ward is usually placed between the second and third wave in that case, or like the second last and last wave. That's when you place the ward, or maybe even earlier than that, like maybe even after the first wave. But you're not gonna do it like, I mean, if you have to do it even after that, it means you didn't anticipate and think about it beforehand. It can happen, but that might cost you like a minion or two. But yeah, usually this ward is placed beforehand because you know the situation might occur. You know how this situation pans out and how you can play it. And the point is, like, if this wave is big enough, you can finish the push and just give up a few CS at least. Like, and at least you have the time advantage, you have everything you wanted, just not a couple of minions. But that's the best case scenario. If you don't have a ward, it gets a little bit less it might get a little bit more awkward. Where let's say, if you were to stay in experience range until you see the jungler, you might already die. So you might already just have to leave completely beforehand. So now you lose these minions in 100% of the cases. So the ward kind of helps you to play a little bit more aggressively, at least. Sometimes a lot more aggressive. Yeah. And then the other situation, this is just one situation though, right? The situation that Darius was in wasn't like this, because he only did a 2-wave push. And in a 2-wave push, all these minions at the start, half of them die. So it's way less. It's not just 1 wave less than a 3-wave push. You get like more than twice as little minions. So you only got like a couple of minions like pushing or something. And these are not going to be substantial. So if there's some minions over here and you just leave it, then this is just going to awkwardly push into you. Or he can freeze it. Like, he can just freeze it, and at least, maybe he's going to push, but there's going to be a lot of minion deaths in the meanwhile, on the next wave as well, and you're going to lose a lot. So he needs to make sure he shoves this in proper. So what happens is, even if you go out to ward at that point, and you're like, I'm just going to sit here and push another wave, if then the jungler shows up and you need to move back, as a jungler, in this situation, you're not even if you know this is warded, you're still gonna make this move just to force him out, because this is when he loses the level advantages in the entire lane, and that should be enough to make Renekton win the lane.
So, would you say that lower elo players wouldn't have immediately shoved? They would have maybe gone for the ward first, which is what I would have done.
Yeah, like
And
even in medium elo.
That gets you less.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get you're gonna have the risk of being zoned off. Like if Nidalee responds appropriately, she's gonna just zone off the Darius from the wave, and it's gonna be like an awkward freeze.
And then Nubrek was hiding behind you the whole. And then what can you do?
Jesus Christ! I've only heard tales about the Nubrek and what's the other guy's name? Those guys.
Night Blue.
Wait, who?
Night Blue.
Oh, Night. Oh, okay. All right. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that kind of just means that even in medium elo, let's say in Diamond, it would be really common for that to happen, where people are usually like, they know certain fundamentals, like I have a good slow push, I got a good trade-off, I have offensive summoners, so I can maybe defend myself a little bit against a gank. I'm not gonna die. I might not even have to use flash. And then they're just gonna like slow push into Knight or Renekton, and then they have to like abandon a wave or something, and like they lose out on some stuff. While like in Challenger, this guy's like, oh, he took a bad trade, Nidalee's coming top lane, Rengar can't respond. I'm gonna bolt in this and shove this out and just completely sit under my turret. You know, like he's calculating that ahead of time really far and really quickly and accurately.
So in low elo, should I be adjusting to the fact that my jungler probably isn't going to be isn't the thing that's going to keep me um, keep me learning new things, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Because
okay.
it always feels like a similar situation. There's going to be the Darius that takes TP and just stands, like, keeps the waves in the middle somehow. Or,
Okay.
like, that's not what I mean. I mean, like, actually lets the wave push back to him. And then there's going to be the other type that just pushes and holds it outside my tower.
Yeah, yeah, but
And then the one that lets it bounce is just going to slow push back into me.
yeah, I get it.
And it's just all what happens. It's just the two ways, and I struggle to answer both of them, if you know what I mean.
Okay, I see what you mean. All right. Um, honestly, I mean, whatever place, like, you have to obviously always strategize around the people that you're playing against. And it's like, you kind of want to assume a little bit of towards the worst case, not like literally, but reasonably. So let's say Renekton, if Renekton was truly assuming the worst case of like Nidalee not having any game sense, then his trade would have been really stupid. And if the worst case assumption would be that the Darius actually doesn't think about what he's doing and just denies the Renekton while Nidalee doesn't respond. But you gotta be reasonable. It's top 200, so these people are all aware of the same concepts as each other. And in Silver, the chances of that being the case are much smaller. So the chances of a Darius actually denying you really hard, and a Nidalee, like, I mean, even if it's like with less pristine mechanics, like still you're gonna face Darius players that are gonna try and deny you and zone you off, and then there's gonna be a lot of Nidalee players that don't respond to that. So yeah, you do need
Well,
to adjust to that. And
maybe I like deny myself when I play into a lane bully. Because I don't usually like. Are you meant to be contesting? Like into a lane bully that's pressuring your farm? Like, are you meant to contest?
that
Because
depends, right?
Darius can just like pull me in and then chunk me for a fuck ton,
This is like, I mean, if you look at
or
this scenario,
get more control. And it's
yeah,
just
if you look at this
I'm not sure
scenario,
how I'm meant to do it.
why did Renekton like walk up and contest the Darius?
Because his jungle was near.
Yeah, yeah. What would he have done if it was an enemy in Italy that starts on red buff?
He would have let it push into him.
Yeah. So you know that it's adaptive, and you know what like the rough ideas behind it. Obviously, like yeah, sure, if an enemy jungler is like threatening you, of course you know that you're supposed to play more defensively in general, unless you can like build an advantage substantial enough to 2v1. So you know those kind of things. That's in your regular solo queue games. It doesn't. The only thing that changes is your environment, but the decision making process itself doesn't change. It's like the actual decisions you might have to go for might be different. Like in this case, you might not trade with Darius and just let him push anyway. But you're not going to change the fact that you're going to have to depend how aggressively or defensively you play based on how likely it is that your jungler might gank or the enemy jungler might gank. Given that both of those are less consistent and less given the lower you go. But they're still going to gank. They're still junglers. They're still somewhat reliable. So, yeah, you in the case of for example a Darius, the matchup is a skill matchup because you have that constant interaction between when
Yeah.
Darius pulls you and does a trade and how if you can get out of that or not. So, in that case, you want to be pushing to win the lane, but the question is when is the best time, and that comes down to the power spikes and trading sequences. So if you're Tryndamere, for example, that's going to be slightly different than Renekton. Renekton needs to level 3. Tryndamere, not as much. You can start doing stuff at level 2. If you think, if I'm playing against a Tryndamere, it's the same kind. Like I don't want him to freely stack up Fury on the wave, so I can't just let him get the minion like a slow push into me. But if I contest him early on, he might not get to that point where he can build up that wave. So he might have to try and play defensively and just thin out my waves to get a little bit of Fury at a time, and just I whittle him down and he tries to sustain back up. And then it just comes down to mechanical accuracy and execution. And also the junglers, right? So really at that point it's like you're making the same types of decisions, but you're just adapting it based on the jungle matchups and the players, right? Like, you're making decisions based on, like, when you spike, like, you're gonna behave. Renekton is gonna play defensively, usually, at level 1. And at level 2, he's still kind of shitty. And Tryndamere can start, like, slow pushing level 1, and, like, has more potential to actually contest people level 1 with the Fury mechanic. It's much more strong than it is on Renekton, right? Like, Tryndamere level 1-2 is way bigger than Renekton level 1-2.
I've never played the Tryndamere into Renekton. It's
Fair.
been the perma-ban since day one.
But I mean, if we talked about two champions that we've both never played, if we talk about, I don't know, Orianna versus Ahri or something, you already know, like, yeah, Orianna has a lot of poke, Ahri has, like, catch ability, so maybe he wants to try and get some jungle help and, like, get some follow-up on that charm. And you kind of already know that when that charm doesn't land, or when, like, Orianna is slow pushing, that she naturally has an advantage. Because obviously it would be completely broken if a champion with a charm would also outpoke an Orianna with only poke abilities. So you know generally how that matchup's going to play. Like, Ahri, if the jungler's near, it would be nice if Ahri just took a disadvantageous trade, just a trade, and try and also stay in charm range while all that is happening, so she doesn't have to telegraph it when she does get a gank. She wants to thin out the wave instead of letting it crash. If the jungler's completely MIA, then she wants to speed up the push, do the exact opposite, conserve health. So I've never played the matchup, but I can guarantee if I show it in High Elo, it's gonna be something like that, right? It is always based on general understand. And then if you actually play the matchup, I might make mistakes with my mana costs, like I might be using the Q too often, or like how much HP an all-in does. Like that, those are things you can learn by playing. But the general understanding of like how it works is what you can do, like even without having played it. Let's say, for example, against Renekton, you know he gets the W and E. That really is what makes him a champion. And you know he doesn't get that until level 3. So you know Tryndamere level 2 can still beat a Renekton. So that's how you know when that power spike in the lane is. If you ask me how many minions does a Renekton have to have as an advantage to beat a Tryndamere, that's when it gets really hard. Estimations, etc. You have to play it, get a feel for it. But again, that's, you know, that's trial and error. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, the difference between, let's say, for example, trial and error, like, really getting more accuracy on each evaluation that you make versus conceptual understanding. That's what you can learn just by watching a replay like this. So you're training to different things there in the real game versus in a VOD like this.
Okay.
Because obviously, like, nobody gets good at the game just by watching VODs. You can get pretty good at, like, some analysts only look at VODs and become really good at analyzing, but there's still some gap between that and actually implementing it in game. It's not humongous. It's not like gonna take years, but you know, that comes down to the specifics. So. Yeah, that's just something, if you look at this, like, usually if you look at the abilities and what they do, what their purpose is, like poke, all-in, disrupt, disengage, like disrupt is just one version of disengage, right, like CC disengage, shields are like disengage on for example, Orianna. They kind of build a buffer to stop someone from trading with you from that point, just like minions do. You kind of know how the champions work. Like Renekton versus Darius, that's like burst trades versus long trades. You know how that works because of spacing. Any champion that has more zonal control, like almost any champion that has control in one zone and doesn't have a lot of spacing, usually benefits from people entering that zone and staying in there for a while. And champions that have a lot of spacing are countered those champions. So, for example, what do you feel, which champion type counters juggernauts and which...
What? bruises. I don't know what you called it before. And then juggernauts are countered by poke.
Yeah, so Juggernauts. Yeah, fair enough. So you could say poke. And essentially, Juggernauts protect a little zone. So something that's really good at going in and out of that zone really quickly. So, like, this is usually. I forgot the word for it.
Little yodel.
Sorry, what?
A yodel.
I mean, do the Yordles all, like, are they all able to get in and out of space quickly?
Yeah, they're little. They go in and out of things.
Really?
Places.
Oh, God.
Yeah, they're short.
Jeez. Okay, that's not what I was thinking of, but that. Jeez Christ. Fair enough. That's another way of doing it.
And then like Canon Timo.
Oh right. I thought of the word.
Yeah.
Target access. So like poke counters them in a way. Poke sets up a win condition where they're usually level 1, 2. That's game specific. Maybe in another type of MOBA game with different design, maybe poke wouldn't counter Juggernauts, but target access will always counter Juggernauts. Poke is more like a consequence that in order to compensate for these Juggernauts level 3, usually poke champions can just pick their poke abilities, and they're much more like even. Like if you compare QW and E, they're usually like almost equally valuable. While for a lot of Juggernauts and Bruisers, it might be like her Q is everything, and then this is nothing, and maybe these two only work in conjunction. Like it's much more level dependent. Let's say a Janna level 1-2 is going to be a lot stronger than Alistar level 1-2, because Janna's poke and Alistar's all in. So that tends to work the same for the entire game, but it's only a consequence for this for League of Legends. While like the target exit thing, like for example, Renekton should theoretically counter Darius, but Darius has tools that when someone enters it, he's gonna pull you in and keep you there. So that is essentially a skill matchup. Because
what are there matchups that aren't skill matchups?
Yeah, like let's say
Tahm Kench Tryndamere. No?
I mean, did you say Tahm Kench versus MF or with MF?
Tryndamere. Tahm Kench versus Tryndamere.
Okay. Presuming Tahm Kench wins that really, really hard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a good example. Yeah. I mean, what can you do? Like, you lose if you auto, you lose if you don't auto. Yeah, you kind of just lose. Yeah, that's a good example. There's plenty of matchups like that. Let's say, I mean, Quinn, you can run a Quinn down. There's a little bit of a skill matchup if you take Ghost and Darius. If you took Teleporting Darius, I'd say Quinn versus Darius is not a skill matchup. You have to make it a skill matchup by bunching up all of your abilities to slow push and to just properly trade and poke and zone and properly respect enemy junglers. It's a skill matchup, so to say, if you really make big blunders, but in high elo it wouldn't be a skill matchup. And even in high elo, Renekton's still a skill matchup. But yeah, so we're getting a little bit like this, just some random examples, but generally speaking, you had Juggernauts. Juggernauts, if you look at it, Darius is good at pulling someone to the center once he gets in a certain zone with his E, which means that people really ideally want to be between the area that is their maximum range and Darius' maximum range. You know what that's called?
What? Like the distance between their ranges?
No. What it's called if you want to try and stay within these two ranges, like between your maximum range and someone else's smaller maximum range. I mean, even if it's a big, actually, you could also reverse it and say your maximum.
Do you mean like spacing?
I mean, it is an example. Spacing can also be that you, for example, just remain outside someone's range as far as you can. So one way of spacing. Spacing can be that, for example, after every auto attack you move around the lane. That's also a form of spacing. So spacing is this is a subtype of spacing. It's a specific way of spacing.
weaving, tethering. I don't
Oh
know.
man, oh you actually, damn, you actually watched those videos or something? Like what? Are you like, did you watch the LS
I watched that a long time ago. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, okay, so that,
and then my friend started talking about it like a couple weeks ago. Like
ah,
he talked about like I'm tethering this guy, and I'm just
ah,
like, oh, yeah, okay. Because I told George, it was 6 months ago then. Because I told George, and he's like, do you really think the retards in your elo understand what tethering? Like, because I was saying like maybe if I focused on things like this, it would help. And he's just like, do you really think that's like gonna make a difference considering who you're playing against? And I'm like, yeah, okay.
I mean, it's a good, I mean, that's a good example, right? Let's say, it's like saying a mosquito or like flies. Flies apply a lot of concept, like, if you look at the travel path of a fly, it's like just bear with me for a second. It's like if you have to like explain how they do it.
Lie.
Sorry.
Flies, what? Flies are OP because they're too fast, but then mosquitoes are slow, so you can get them.
Yeah, exactly. So like mosquitoes are like yeah, I don't even
They
know where
hurt
I'm going
more,
with this,
but they're slower.
yeah, mosquitoes are like the juggernauts. Like they gotta sneak up on you because it's not gonna work otherwise. All right, but flies, if you have to explain how they move and why they're hard to hit, it takes like a couple of research papers and a half to like really dig into like, wait, how are they doing that? But a fly is like stupid as shit, right? So he doesn't know what he's doing. It's like, and if you look at League, you got people with abstract understanding of certain concepts playing a game that you can play on a large basis just by like your reptilian instincts of like, this guy is over here, he's threatening me, I want to move the hell out of here, and then I don't know, I got some resource coming up over there, I want to go there. Like you're constantly just, the way you're spacing is usually just based on simple concepts of like health and resources. So it
What,
doesn't take like,
like cooldowns?
yeah, exactly. Like the minions, the cooldowns, the health bars, the positions of the different people. But it's like, if you have to explain it like this, like for example, tethering is something that's hard to explain. But even if you have a natural feel for the game, you're naturally gonna be like, I want to stay away from this dude, but I can hit him over here, so that's where I want to be. Right? It just has a name. We're giving it a name, but even in like say the animal kingdom or something, this concept is gonna happen all the time. Tethering is just a natural consequence of you wanted to stay outside of like you don't want to go into this range, and you want to enter into this range. You just overlap them, and you get this zone. And we just called like just staying within that zone. It has a name because we like being able to give things names and talk about it. But it's so essentially what I'm saying is just because it's like not often talked about doesn't mean it isn't applied even towards the lower ends of the elo a little bit, maybe not consistently but a little bit, and it doesn't mean it doesn't help if you control this really well. I'd say it's one of the most integral aspects in the entire game. Everyone does, even in the lowest elo, even a Caitlyn is gonna try and auto max range and move out before like he gets hit by Lucian, even in silver. That's called tethering.
Not nine. I've seen nine players, man. They actually exist. They're worse than me. I didn't.
Okay.
I thought I was the worst, but this player's worse than me. Makes me happy.
Okay. Okay. You get my point, I hope. It's like, I mean,
Yeah.
come on. It's like, it's so it's just like, just because a concept doesn't always need to be mentioned doesn't mean it doesn't get applied. Even if it's inconsistently or poorly, it's still like, yeah. You can't play the video game without it. It's literally what you do all the time, even if you've never heard about it. It's just like the decision making loop. It's like, to go over each aspect there, it's like you're already doing all of them, even if you don't know about them. Same thing here. Like you're already tethering. It's just that when you mention it, we might get a more accurate view of it. That's all. Models are always just made to explain something that already happens naturally. Like the game itself, you could play the game just by understanding the basics, like health bars and abilities. But the problem is that whatever, anything, jungle or matchups, doesn't matter. You remember, like,
Yeah. Yes.
if remember, like, we had Renekton W, right? And we determined, at least I determined, maybe I'm wrong, but what I'm stating, essentially, let's say you have the theory that you can E Renekton after W. Then the next time you ever play this, you're gonna just go into that with this idea and you're gonna test it. So that's absolutely fine, as long as that's not some grand world finals. Once you test it out, it's fine. So you know what I mean? It's like, so this is completely okay if you try and E after that, and you're gonna get a result if it's like yes or no, if that's good. My idea is that it's a no. We'll just go with that for now. So, so we're asking ourselves within the time frame before the W when you need to E, when you need to W, etc. And then, if Renekton E's into you, you have a pretty big any spacing tool that someone uses to catch up to you is one that he already used before the trade even starts. So it assumes that Renekton has an advantage. Or if he doesn't, it means he put himself at a disadvantage. So usually in lane, Renekton wants to walk up and start zoning Darius off, and if the trade starts without Renekton using E, it's a lot easier to stop the trade. So if there's minions over here, think about if Renekton trades with Darius by walking over here, right? Then he can dash through the minions like this.
Yeah.
Problem is though that Darius doesn't have to get into melee range. You can like try and land a Q, and if Darius gets the Q, it gets the E with the Q. Q has a much shorter cooldown. So again, like you're winning out in that situation. So you gotta evaluate the cooldowns, right? And if any trading actually happens, like the health bar and the mana, and just determine who wins. Evaluate it. And in this case, in this situation, if Renekton gets queued and has to E out, that's gonna be the Darius, right? Does that make sense? So in that case, Renekton, what does Renekton do when Darius charges a Q? And he's like, right now he's somewhere in this range.
He tries to step away, but then he gets creep blocked and gets hit.
Haha, nice, nice. Has happened before. Yeah. All right, fair enough.
Yes, it definitely has.
If Darius now doesn't have his Q anymore, so he just has W and E, and you still have Q, W, and E. This is Darius. This is Renekton. You have all of these up, and Darius only has these two up. Then who wins out?
Well, I mean, in the EW E auto WE trade, without Darius having his Q up, even if putting the Q in like after the first dash, if Darius doesn't have his Q, but he like hits something else, is it still worth for a Renekton?
What is something else? You mean another champion or minion?
Like another ability, like if Darius hits his E because of the extra time it took for Renekton to use his Q, or does it not matter if Renekton goes EQWE? He's still stunned for the same amount of time.
In that case, I mean, usually you would auto instead of Q, because I mean, that would be really rare that you wanted to just QW, but it's possible. It's still like a similar sequence, right? Like in terms of how much time it takes. But it's like, essentially, whether you can do that or not, it's like Darius in this case initiates with Q, right? But your idea was trying to walk out. So if you walk out, you're assuming that you're gonna lose if you go in. So you do have to know that that's actually true. But if you go in, remember we had like a sequence, for example, before, like E auto W or EQW, whatever. Like you can still use your E out. So you can get out in time, and in that situation you won. So that kind of just tells you that Darius can initiate with Q. Darius always wants to keep his Q up. If I'm playing Darius, I might keep my Q up for ages, because just pressing Q when he's on the verge somewhere, he's always going to be able to trade onto me and potentially get out very early on. So if instead, if Renekton just walks up and he still has to make a choice to go in on me, and he goes for the E, W, blah, 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 now I'm not animation locked. So before this W from Renekton happens, you get to pull him out of it and Q. For example, E plus Q is a guaranteed hit. And then you can, afterwards, you can move away. And if Renekton chases you, I mean, then all hell breaks loose, because you still have your slow up. So, like, by the time Renekton hits his W, you already have, like, 3 stacks on him. And Renekton is chasing you, right? Right, when this happens. So, then, Darius generally wins out. A lot. Like, a lot. So, he got the epic sustain from the Q, that's like 12%. He's gonna almost have lost, like, little HP, very little HP. So, Darius doesn't want to start with Q. And Renekton doesn't want to start with like E into something W. These are all bad sequences, so to say. So ideally it's like if both players walk up, then Renekton has this W, right? That's where Darius wants to tether and make sure that he doesn't enter that range. And then Darius can't really Q unless he's already like got some sort of advantage. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So Renekton is like has eventually start playing around the minions, right? Because in without the minions, both sides essentially are in a stalemate. Whoever initiates the trade loses. Like Renekton, if Renekton walks up with W, which one is longer, Darius W or Renekton W?
Darius W.
Yeah. So like even during the channel, Renekton can hit his W, but it means that at least they traded auto attacks. But now, it's a little bit different than it was before. Because if Renekton just stops right now and moves out, before this we had a full sequence, like E plus auto attack plus W, and then usually you can also fit in a Q and then E out. But this was just like something I haven't added in yet, but it's like usually something you can do. This would be like the ideal burst trade. If you don't get any retaliation, right? If you could make it happen. Just like freezing. Freezing usually can't be done, but if it can, then it's usually good. And then Darius is gonna prevent
when you
this.
say that usually freezing can't be done, are you meaning in like high elo players just won't let it happen?
Yeah.
They'll try their best not to let it happen.
Yeah, for
So in
example,
low
Darius
elo,
will like shove the wave
people
before.
don't
Sorry?
people don't respect the value of a freeze in low elo. Would you say that?
Maybe they don't know that it's gonna be a freeze, and like I don't know exactly when, in what situations, what might happen, but in general, people are usually aware. Even in silver, 99% of players are aware of what a freeze is. To me, that was surprising because I never knew when I was playing. But point is, usually people make it happen because they don't judge things correctly. Like they might not judge that the Nidalee started topside and that, let's say, Renekton's trading because he sees Nidalee move, right? So like these things, like if you don't evaluate them, then you don't know that you're gonna end up in a freeze over here if you don't push. That's how it usually happens. Like not planning forwards and trying to read opponents enough. That's the most common thing. And then in higher elo, people usually think, why is this guy trading? Why is this guy shoving the wave so hard? Why are things happening? Why are these playing, assuming that you're playing against someone who knows something that you might not. They might know where the jungler is and you don't. Right now. So yes, freezing generally is something that they won't let happen because of forwards planning. Yeah, like trying to determine, can you slow, like for example, a good example was Cho versus Karma. If you plan ahead, you know Karma like pokes level 1 and 2. You know Karma wants a wave in the center, and you want it under your turret. And if she wins and pokes you a lot, then you would ideally just want the wave in Cho versus Karma, the reason this ended up in a freeze is because, or like over here, sorry. So the Cho'Gath was pushing without any forwards planning of like what Karma's gonna do while he's there. He's not thinking about like auto Q, another auto Q, another auto Q, and this is going on like forever. And then literally the Cho'Gath is just sitting there going like, I guess I'm getting poked a lot. That's like not thinking about this beforehand and then concluding that you can't push. That's how you prevent the freeze. So that's like just the short answer, I guess, would be that usually freezing is prevented by thinking about the lane matchup and where both sides want the wave, determining each player's wave tactics before the lane even starts. That's how you usually prevent one side from doing something stupid and ending up in an awkward freeze. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Alright, fair enough. Yeah, it's like, because we were thinking about Darius versus Renekton, right? It's like, the ideal sequence, like, essentially, it's one of these moments where, Darius, if Darius doesn't get contested, he wants to also start with an auto attack, and then reset it, and then usually you can get another auto in, and then Q, and, you know, you keep going like that. And eventually you pull someone in if they try and escape. That's your ideal, and then you end with R. That's your ideal trading pattern for Darius, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it never happens. Just like Renekton's sequence with like auto attacks and everything, like it doesn't really happen. So when you know this is the case, right? You essentially put Darius on one side and Renekton on one side. Whoever targets the other one first with an ability loses, because Darius can't start with Q. I mean, Darius might be able to start with W, but if he starts W, he needs to kite back. So that's a very short trade. That's an extremely short trade. And if he starts with E, he just loses altogether. Like he literally, like, he gets smashed by Renekton. And for Renekton, it's like he wants to kind of not use his E.
Wait, so if Darius uses his E early, Renekton can hold on to his E and escape.
Yep.
Or am I misreading?
No, that's perfect. Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
Okay. So you're always looking at the enemy's ideal situation and trying to avoid that.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to. It's just like in chess, right? You just analyze the.
So you're not thinking. Well, I mean you are, but to find out your ideal, you have to know what's least ideal for your opponent.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Just like essentially in like
I
the
mean
best line of
that's
play.
pretty intuitive. Like everyone that knows it, but like
But just
I don't
thinking
really.
about it, yeah, it can help sometimes. Just like, oh, wait a second. A lot of people go wrong somewhere when they don't refine these kind of things. And it's like some
Yeah,
people
because
naturally do it.
I'll skip too many like of the basic steps in a decision making process. I might get something like I might miss something very basic, but it's important, and then that'll be the reason I mess something up. So I guess starting from the beginning, like what's not ideal for them, what's the least ideal for them, can help me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like that. From there, you build on, like, wait, what does the enemy do then? Like, the best line of play is just always composed very simply, like, the best move of each player, right? So, like, usually in chess, for example, that's just how you analyze. If you ever play any strategic game, right, and you do it in sequence, like, let's say it's player 1 and player 2, you just keep doing that. Like, you just keep repeating the sequence. And that all together just forms the best line of play. While like what we were describing before is we start out with just like the best move for one player, and then just repeating that over and over again. That's like our ideal situation. And then we did the same thing for player 2. and repeated that. That's like ideal for them. And then what we're trying to think about is like, obviously, how can you achieve as many of these and prevent as many of these, and how can your opponent do that? That's how you tend to determine the best moves at each point. At each point you repeat the question, what would be essentially you're asking what would be my best move, assuming my opponent will find the best response once I do so. So you have this ideal situation, but it might get countered by your enemy, by the player 2. Right, and he has a better move as a response, which makes your sequence really bad. So then you're gonna build, essentially recursively, you're gonna determine what the best way of playing is. Like and it's not that hard in practice, because you'll remember, right? You'll remember what happened. You'll have certain concepts. Like if you start out a trade with something like a gap closer, then even without really using the gap closer at an optimal time in the trade, you already have something on cooldown. It's never a good thing. I mean, it can be necessary, but it means you already had an advantage if that works. So okay, well,
it's
best
like
line of playing.
it's like a ribbon get to initiate the trade.
Yeah. So it's like, and you want to kind of determine like how much spacing can someone use to still win the trade. How does me kiting backwards affect me, right? So a lot of times maybe one player has an advantage, but then the other one can mitigate it by kiting back, and at least he might not win, but he's at least not giving the enemy player full control over the waves. That's also with Renekton. You might, for example, auto W when Renekton walks up and then E out. And then even if Darius responds here with an E, right, you still have your E up. You're still gonna be able to walk away from this and use your abilities. So in that case, both sides use their entire sequence of abilities to contest the wave. And if one player has a level advantage, that might not work out so well. If one player is gonna have a jungler soon, that might not work out so well. But in an isolated lane, you kind of need to use your abilities anyway, even if you lose the trade slightly. So you're gonna have like optimal trading patterns under certain conditions. So for example, if Renekton is really low, you might, for example, flash plus E, right? For example, flash E might land the Nidalee Spear, and then that secures the kill. Obviously, this is not an ideal sequence if you don't have an advantage, but it's a certain condition. So there's always a certain condition, or what sometimes they call that an event or a trigger, whatever. They're all the same concept. Doesn't matter what you call them, and a certain response or action. Right. That's usually how it's divided. And in this case, that might be like Renekton being below 20% HP or whatever it is, like, and the Nidalee coming. They're completely obvious when they happen in game, but that's usually what it's divided between. Yeah. That's when I look at your VOD, for example. That's kind of what I'm looking for. If there's like patterns that maybe you're always too enthusiastic, or you don't look for certain triggers. Like, hey, wait a second, did you look at where the jungler is? Because that's a trigger you need to keep in mind, or whatever, right? That's how you can develop. All right. So that's it's a lot of information, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like if you look at each aspect, let's say if you look at information and you divide it into different components, they all impact each other very heavily. And if you look at the different stages of making a decision, then they also impact each other really, really heavily. Like, especially something beforehand impacts the next step the most. And the thing is, it's called a loop for a reason. Why do you think it's called a loop? The decision-making loop.
Because it's a loop.
Well, how does it loop? Where's the loop?
It's the beginning to the end. Goes back.
Yeah, and that is this. It's the action. Like, it ends with you doing something. So it's like, when the most common situations in game where it's like, where I go into training mode and not coaching mode, is when someone, for example, doesn't have excellent mouse control, but they want to kind of camp. So they're all the time they're just clicking, 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 and there's something going on over here. These guys might be flashing. Did you notice that? No, I didn't. I was clearing the camp, and they might be gankable or whatever, and you're still clearing the camp. You have no fucking idea. That's usually because of this little part right here. You might have a good game sense. You might know if I tell someone, hey, look at this, what's happening, and what should you do? They know all the other steps, but because in game they're like doing something, they're not gathering information. It's generally that's what forms the loop. So the better you get at like quick control, quick accurate control on your kiting, you know exactly how it's done. That gives you the control to also look at other lanes and just have some time to think. So the earlier you observe, the earlier you're. Let's say you're kind of, I know you're top, but let's say you were to jungle and you're gonna go from here to here. That's a good time to look and predict and gather information. That gives you that time. So like now when you run the camp, you might be like, I mean, let's be honest, screw mid lane, it's never gankable anyway. I'm not gonna look at that for a second, and you're gonna prioritize based on that. But that's because you're not gonna do that if you're over here and you don't know anything about these lanes. You have to look at them virtually randomly. These are equally close, so you might look at mid lane first, and you're wasting time because you could be looking at bot lane if you did this earlier. So it's all that like sequencing. Like the earlier you're done doing one thing, the earlier you can do the next thing, right? So
yes,
and that's like this is just a general framework. It doesn't tell you how to play. It just tells you, you know, like a description of it. But that's like what I use a lot.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, how did I get into this? What was the starting point? Because I don't remember. Because I
don't know. You said something about mentality, and then you're like, okay. And then you said something to do with LOP.
Yeah, lines of play.
Yeah, you went into that.
I don't know how I went from mentality to decision making. That one is a little bit beyond me. I'll admit very much. That's beyond me. I don't know how I got from one to the other. That's a pretty hard transition. Like, mentality, decision making. Wait, what? I don't
maybe
know.
it was something to do with like thought processes. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean they are heavily related. I won't lie. It's like usually if people feel like they don't have a lot of agency, one very common way. Let's say if people trade a lot in lane and they're really good at trading. Usually what tends to happen is if you climb a little bit, you get to a point where people trading with you are maybe a little bit worse at it, but they're thinking ahead, they're planning ahead, and training when they can trade well. Like, when to trade. And it's like, when this happens, when you lose the trade, so like you win a trade, and then you die to a gank, right? Something, and you die, it tends to feel like you don't have any game agency, because you're just being capped. And then if you like look back on a replay and see, for example, how Darius is like, potentially he's in a zone where he's going to get camped the living hell out of. But very early on, he's constantly going through observations, predictions, evaluating, thinking about what his opponent's doing, why. He's constantly planning ahead. So he prevents this entire situation altogether, and he has perfect agency over the lane. That's a good example of like the connection between how you play the game and how you perceive it. That's not how I initially intended it to be. That's not what I was thinking about when I was explaining the loop. I don't know why I was explaining that, but that's a good just to tie into that. That is a good example of how mentality is related to how you play the game. And if you look at one thing, I think I was looking at focus, and I was explaining focus. I wasn't looking into mentality yet. Like, focus is kind of in between mentality and gameplay, right? Like, your mentality might worsen your focus, but it's a little bit, it's its own concept, so to say, right?
Yeah. Yes.
It's like, if you look at, and focus and the decision-making loop have a very heavy connection. because what tends to happen is if you, obviously since every link in the chain is connected to one another, what tends to happen is your focus is distributed among each part. So if you essentially only have a certain bucket to distribute, but let's say 80% of it goes towards trading, then you're never going to be strong in any other aspect. And because you're weak at the other aspects, you're eventually going to be bad at trading. That's the funny part. Like, you're going to be bad, maybe not at how you execute it, but when you do it. So, you have events and actions. You might be good at the actions, but you're not looking at the events, because for that you need to go through the entire decision-making loop and not just one little part of it. So that's just an example. And you said, for example, when you flame, right? When you're even like playing the game. Like I have a lot of permaban accounts, and it usually starts.
Lucky.
Way too many. Like, holy shit. Tyler won many. Nah, not that many, but a lot. So what usually happens is at the start, like, you got a chat box over here, right? What in the chat box is useful to you?
When I get that Smurf support every 200 games that sets everyone's flash timers.
Yeah. And you get pings.
Well, if you turn on timer, you can like see when the missing ping happened.
Yep.
So that when someone says, "Why didn't you MIA Elena?" you see you did.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what can I say? It's like, yeah, you're right. That is a very valid purpose of the pings. They're okay. So number 4 is evidence. Nah, just kidding. But yeah. So yeah, okay. But yeah, mostly if you were playing top, does it matter if bot lane is flash?
If you have TP.
If you're TP, yeah, right. So you're thinking like, can I somehow get here, or can they get to me? And the answer is usually either they lose tier 1.
Lane swap.
Yeah, exactly, right? Lane swap. Or you have TP. Maybe your Collector rank or whatever, like TP or global presence. You know the options. The options aren't hard to list when you know the concept, so you know how you get there. So, in general, you need to know that flash if you might consider a TP. In that case, do you want to rely? Does every bot laner in silver ping a flash when it happens?
Oh,
I love asking questions that are just like so awkwardly obvious that it's like you're not sure if it's a trick question. Nah, it's not like it. I never ask trick questions, except when I ask like, no, I'm not gonna list any examples. No, I don't have the balls. But yeah, all right. So yeah, no, they're not gonna do that. That's right. So, in a way, you don't. You like if you become dependent on it, you essentially will not get the summoner timing properly. In a team, it would be different. You just don't care. They're gonna time it every single time. Done. But in solo queue, it doesn't work. So would it make sense to have the messages for, let's say, for example, summoner timers on?
no.
Not really. In a way, it drives you. So it's like, in a way, it drives you towards the 50% mark. And it's like, it's really easy. You just look at the chat. But if you want to get to 100%, you just can't use the method at all. There's no way. There's no way you can do that by looking at the chat. So you have to start looking. If you want a TP, you have to look. You have to gather information and just look if they flash. But then this becomes entirely irrelevant because you're looking anyway, and you can get to 100% instead of 50%. You see where I'm going with this? This is very slowly going towards the road of chat is entirely useless. Because if it's like, let's say you want to make a decision and you want to make a cold, calculated decision, like, does it help when someone's like, no, don't do it, 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 don't do it? You know what I mean? It's like,
Don't do it.
you see what it's like? pings are designed to make other people communicate what they want you to do. That's not what you want to do when you want to be the one climbing. Like, you're playing with people that are hard stuck, and your goal is to improve. So your goal should be to make the calls yourself. So you want to be pinging people a lot, but you don't want to receive any. So you can turn off the pings as well. And I'm not even gonna
good
mention.
idea.
Okay. All right. And I'm
I'm not gonna mention
honestly.
what.
Sorry, you're not sure why. Sorry.
What are you not gonna mention?
Oh, you mean why not? Why mute the pings?
No, what are you not going to mention?
Okay. I'm not gonna mention the chat messages. That one's just too silly. That's never been a useful chess met. It's like you might hear something like group up, guys. Like either that's completely obvious or it's not gonna work in the
No,
first place.
it's gonna be some low gold player that's gonna say 041, trust me. Or like, guys, we can 131.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
And they're gonna not know how to execute it anyway. So it's just gonna be like, yeah, thanks, dude.
Yeah.
And then your ADC is gonna be like, no, we need to.
Yeah.
And then it's just gonna be people saying, Trinamere group, please.
Yeah, Trinamere really good. Yeah, let's team fight. Let's do it. Yeah, fair enough. So that one's just silly to begin with. Like the other ones are debatable. You could start like discussing and thinking about it, but chat messages are just garbage. So a very very heavy recommendation. I don't do it all the time, and it costs me a lot of win percentage and a lot of accounts. But it's like literally /mute does the same thing as full mute now. I don't know why. But literally, if you /mute all in the first 5 seconds, you just added like 10% win rate to your game. Like obviously, I'm just like quote unquote joking, but it's like it does actually make a huge difference for any.
Yeah, it's the secret win button. Rad doesn't want to tell you about.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there should not have been a chat in the first place. They should just do it like the mobile versions do it. You just get certain options of there's an enemy over here, or be careful over there, and you can mute those if you want to, but you don't get the chat. That's
Waiting for voice chat to come.
you're gonna have like the like you're gonna have like it's gonna be absolute
I played
madness.
Dota once, and there was just some guy with like a fan blowing into his microphone, flaming everyone.
Yeah, you
For no
always have
reason.
maximum noise for sure.
Yeah.
Goddamn. That's yeah. Well, while we're waiting for that, really, it's like the thing is, some people who don't actually flame are like, I don't need this because it doesn't, bother me. But it's like if you look at someone's movements, it's like you should constantly be juggling between the camera and the center and like the minimap. Like it should constantly be going back and forth. And if you're actually playing with a chat, you're gonna be doing this like pretty frequently. You're gonna be like diluting that with like at least
You're gonna be bouncing.
yeah.
You're gonna hear a chat message, and you're gonna look at chat. You're gonna hear a ping, and you're gonna look at chat instead of looking at the map.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh, I wasn't thinking about where the jungler was. It's like, yeah, that's because you're doing 17 thing at once instead of, let's say, 12 or 11 or 10 or whatever, right? Like, every single player is overloaded with tasks to do. Like, where's the jungler? How do I trade? Where that minion? Do I auto it twice or once? Where do I stand relative to it? And you're just diluting your own attention with those kind of things. So, yeah, that, and it's like I will readily admit that I sometimes ignore my own advice. I don't always know why. It's just stupid, but yeah, it's definitely highly recommended. This one. That's just one topic of like flaming and focus. It's like, I mean, really, even if you're like, if usually what you also try to do is like, if you're thinking about what someone else is doing, like try and limit yourself to the action itself and like a prediction, which is like one step ahead of that, and then sometimes you can think about why, right? That's like, let's say for example, it might help you with the prediction, but honestly, that's already debatable. You just want to look if, let's say, they're going in or not. Um, you can determine your own line of play, but as soon as you start asking yourself whether that's the right move by them, let's say a Lee Sin walks in here and queues, a lot of times what I think is, why does this idiot queue instead of just walking up to him and Eing him? Right? Because then you just slow him and you get a way easier E, because now you're like on a straight line with him in the escape path, and he's slowed, and you're close range. Why the hell would you not do that and land your Q, right? Does that reasoning process make sense?
Yes,
Then,
it does.
then really in that situation, I'm correct. Let's say under the assumption, right? Like we're assuming I'm correct. But really, I was already like, I could have already thought like, wait a second, it's for 25. These raptors spawn for 35. If we finish this wave, can we get there? Right? And I'm not thinking about that. I'm still 5 seconds later. I'm still thinking about the Lee Sin queue. It takes a few seconds, but it's the few seconds where I'm already like, oh right, I could have gone here. Like I should have just walked straight through or whatever. Like all these little decisions. You constantly. It's not unusual to have a few seconds margin on your plays, and that's it. That's how you waste them. So, I usually try to do is like, this doesn't always work, but it's like if you constantly try and cycle through certain set questions and set, like I literally, I work with sheets of questions for myself. Sometimes I hand them out to coaches that are crazy enough to like work with them. But it's like literally like every single wave, like, just ask yourself, like, where do I want the wave to be? You know, the wave. And, like you ask yourself, like, what's the best trading sequence for both players? And what's the best line of play, right? So, like, what's the best trades for both sides? Whatever, like. And you have, like, a set list that can build like that pretty easily, right? It's like, there's only so many game aspects that you can wonder about and actually, like, use to climb. But then you're kind of forcing yourself to cycle in between them. So you're trying to, like, not let any other thoughts enter within that little loop that you create. So you got chat taken care of. You got pings on, like, that try and steer your decisions taken care of. You're trying to, like, ignore what people are doing and just think, where are they gonna end up? And you're just keeping yourself in a process of asking the next question. Is that something that you would be willing to try?
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit, it can get a little bit tedious. So it's usually not something I recommend to do for indefinitely every single game ever. It's usually like I sometimes I distinguish between, let's say, performance and learning. And this is definitely like a performance-based thing. Like you might be able to learn in the process, but it's like it is taxing to play that way. It's like after a few games, you're gonna be like, quote-unquote exhausted if you're constantly like trying to be on your peak performance, so to say, like constantly mentally, mostly.
Yeah.
That's just a little bit about focus and how I approach that personally. Like, if you, let's see. Let's see. Just going down the list. If it's easy to solve, then why not? I talked about game agency and focus and the consistency mentality. Those are three things. You can't. I remember you mentioned about not exactly knowing what you did wrong, right? Like, that's something you mentioned.
Yeah.
So, yeah, do you have any examples?
I mean, oh. It's like when you can get to like a frustrating spot because you there's no other solutions that you can consider. You know what I mean?
Other solutions
you've
than what?
tried that you can consider. Like you've tried everything.
Okay, okay. Oh, like that.
Thought
Yeah.
would fix it, and none of those worked. So then
Okay.
you don't know what to do, and that's like
That is.
one game I was versing an Israel that was behind, and then we A-rammed, and then we lost the game.
Yeah.
And then the whole game, I was just like, what do I do? What do I do? I don't know what to do here? I don't know how to bring in a lead.
Okay. All right. I mean, hmm. It can be a little hard sometimes to analyze your own game directly. Like, I'll admit that. Because obviously I can always take one specific situation and give you my thoughts, or let's say if someone else analyzed it, then it's even easier. But yeah, that is a limited supply, of course. Um, I mean, in general, do you know the general theories that exist behind stuff like mid game and team fighting and you know win conditions? I hate that word, but you know.
Um, in a way, like recently, do you know the streamer
I've heard
Rangers
of him.
X?
I haven't seen him, but I've heard of him.
He he said like he was making a informative stream, so I watched it. And he mentioned like if he's ahead and his team's feeding, but if there's a chance that a fight's gonna happen, he's gonna work his way over there, which is something I would have never done before.
Okay.
It's like, what would you ask again? Because I had it leading into it.
Um, like like for example, in terms of
Uh,
team fights, like you don't know,
yeah,
like do
like,
you know the general? Oh, right. I asked like, do you know the general theories behind it, like stuff like compositions and win conditions, that kind of stuff.
like champions specifically. I understand what my champion Trinity can do better than um, what the other champions are meant to be doing.
Right. That's fair. That I
I
can't
don't
deny
know,
it. That's common.
better better for me, like like fight, float, and flank. Have you heard of that by Nice?
Fight, float, and flank.
Yeah,
No, I haven't heard of the concept.
that's his in his guide to the art of split push.
Okay.
He outlines that, and he talks about like if he like how his decisions to if he's going to keep pressuring the tower, which is what he calls fight, and then float, which he takes jungle camps, and then
Yeah.
flank, which he goes into the fight,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and he outlines that. And I can do those things, knowing when I should be in the fight, and knowing how I can actually get into the fight and get the most out of it. But that's
Okay.
only Trinamere specific. With say Annie, um, I just try to blow up the backline. It's like not as in depth, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that might also have something to do with the champion. It's a very simple win condition. You click and you kill someone. So you're not wrong in your description of what you should do. It's just not a very complex description. But that's fine. But yeah, I mean, maybe how specific you can get with other champions, like for example Jax, maybe. I don't know. Like, do you know? Like you've played a lot of Jax as well, so maybe that's not the best example. But let's say Camille. Camille would be a really clear champion that's just like good at certain things and bad at others. What will you do in mid game if you don't know the compositions, right? So you just generically, what does Camille do in the mid late game?
Um, she can side lane pretty well because she has good train scaling,
Yeah, yeah,
and she can 1v1 well, so she can split push. Um, Yeah, she can team fight well because of her ultimate. She can single out carry or something.
So what is Camille? I mean, Camille is one of these super overloaded champions that doesn't not do something. It always does something really well or a little bit poorly or mediocre. It can do anything at some rate. But if you look at team fighting, for example, it might be well good into a combo. But if you think about it, she's mostly single target. Just like Tryndamere,
Yeah,
like I mean, if Tryndamere's fed, sure, you can still shred through people in a team fight, but you are single target, so it's not overwhelming. Um, and it's the same thing with any champion, of course. There's no champion that can explicitly not do one thing, but some of them are so bad that it makes it a little bit easier. Camille is more like in the middle with everything. But she's most excellent at skirmishing, creating opportunities to rotate. Um, she's not the best in the 1v1s. She's not going to win against the true duelists, like the Fioras and the Jaxes and the Tryndameres, but she's below that, like just below that. So what she usually does is, let's say, if she shoves a wave in on a turret, force someone to go there and then rotate. While a lot of times with Tryndamere, you may be able to dive someone, you may be able to get a turret. You have more of the aggressive, extended split pushing options on the table, right? But Camille, you know that she has tons and tons of terrain scaling, and combined with CC and picking potential, and that's what makes her excellent at skirmishing. So before you actually look at what you do in one fight, you know generally what you excel at. Catching someone in the jungle, for example, when they're trying to get to you, something like that, when you have a ward. Right, so you got general conditions lined up before you know exactly how much damage she does. You gotta learn that over time, of course, if you play it. Then the question is, if you don't have any idea of what you do, you kind of say that you tried every variation and you ran out of options, right? So nothing really worked. That's what you said, right? That's kind of the problem,
yeah,
right?
that's what I said. I said of the limited decisions that I can think of, or the ones I'm willing to try, because in that moment where I'm frustrated, it's what I want to do to win that game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
There's nothing more. I just want to win that game. And so I'm looking at the decisions, and if it's something like go farm out Gromp, I'm not going to bother considering it. You know, if
Yeah.
if that's like not going to lead towards the win, or what I think's going to lead towards the win.
Okay, okay.
So there's thoughts that might be good, but I just would neglect them because I don't think they're useful.
Right, right. And if you think, like, if you look at, for example, the Darius, right, in that top lane matchup, like, you gotta realize, like, this guy is doing really well in the trade, and then he's about to get completely fucked over by the jungler, right? And he goes with the strategy that loses him a lot of pressure in the lane in the long run. Voluntarily. He already knows he's gonna concede on the bounce, and he's just gonna wait and do nothing, right? So, if you think about that, it usually, I mean, obviously, everyone cares about the win, but there's something going on there if you won't consider the options that you might say. For example, you might say that you know it might be the best option to go just wait for a while and farm your jungle or whatever. So if you're like, what you're saying is kind of the milk has already been spilled. You're already in a losing position where the best solution at that point would be, according to your scenario, to farm your own jungle, for example. Then, right, that is kind of what you're saying, right? You already lost, like, beforehand. Maybe not due to, like, who cares why, but it's like, your best
Yeah,
option at that point would also be losing. And it's like, I can't tell, like, obviously I also care about wins, and it's like, essentially the only question is how much you care about it. And the way you tend to change that is, like, if you look at what creates a certain drive to do something. Let's say, for example, you got a big chat box over here, and there's constantly, like, new messages making a little blooping sound, and they just sequence on top of each other. it drives you to look at it. And there's no way in hell that if I activate a chat that I'm not going to look at it. That's impossible for me. But if I deactivate it and just /mute, it takes no effort at all because there's nothing coming in here. There's no drive to do this. So I'm like, I can't change someone to say suddenly not care about the chat anymore and just not take a look. But what you can do usually is take away the trigger. That is kind of 100 billion times easier of a solution, so to say. And this kind of case, it's like you can't just go from wanting the win to being oriented on, let's say, improvement or whatever it is, like whatever you want out of the game in like one day. But one of the biggest things is if you create incentives for yourself to focus on, or let that just naturally draw your focus, that tends to orient yourself on things other than the win over time. I'll give like an example because it's pretty abstract. It's like if you, for example, if you have 5 goals listed and like let's say you have 3 sequences of 5 concrete goals, things that are completely within your control, and you completed 2 of them. And right now you're at, like, let's say at the start you were like silver 1 or gold 4. And at the end here, let's say you're platinum 3 or platinum 4, whatever. Like, I'm just saying, like, let's say you climbed 1 tier. And you kind of expect that if you do this twice more times, that you're gonna climb to, let's say, diamond or something, or maybe platinum 1. And you're gonna just keep going like that. Then, obviously, over time, you're drawn towards the idea of, like, okay, this has value, or this has a purpose. If you connect what you're doing with the outcome that it has. And it's not going to happen maybe like on the first one over here, but like once you're over here, you're probably going to notice whether this does anything or not, like setting goals and like working on them one at a time or whatever. So what tends to happen is, like, if you work with tools that are designed by whatever coaches, hopefully good coaches, that actually stimulate improvement, it's gonna naturally drive you towards it as well, in-game. Because obviously, if I'm in-game, if I write down my 3 biggest weaknesses beforehand, even if I don't want to focus on it, it's still ingrained in my mind. It's like do not think of the elephant, you know? Like, if I write down everything there is to know about, like, my weaknesses, and then I try to forget them, it's not gonna work. So it's naturally gonna draw my attention to it. And that's what I want, right? That's the goal. So, in a way, it's like, all that's happening if you're just looking at your game screen, and that's all you're working with, is the win, right, at the end. It's like victory or not. And that's your only kind of measure of success, right? Naturally, it's like...
Yeah.
So, in a way, it's like, I can't tell you, like, if this is your only reference frame, there's no way that I could say anything or do anything that's gonna naturally just make you go, like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. That's just not how it works. That would be beautiful. But if you have tools outside of this that are kind of like, that this is just a small part of, it's still gonna matter, you know, you're still gonna care. It's not like you're gonna be, like, completely desensitized to it. That would be a bad thing, actually. But it's going to drop in relative importance. And yeah, that's kind of my point. So what I usually do is say, like, if you work with simple sheets, like super simple sheets, like, let's say 1 or 2 sentences before a game, or let's say you have like 3, you have weaknesses, right? And out of those weaknesses, you have potential solutions, or whatever you want to call them. And then from that follows, like, things you can do in a game. So let's say your weakness is you're not gathering enough information, or maybe you're playing inconsistently because you're not getting enough information. So inconsistency could be a weakness. The solution might be consistent observations, and then the tasks actually consist of, let's say, at every single new wave, you ask a question, like I mentioned earlier, right? Like usually it goes by a set of questions, and then to answer it, you need that observation. It's just a part of this entire process of answering a question. Like, what's my wave strategy? Well, for that, you need to know which jungler gets there first. Well, where are they right now? Where are they going? Right? And then that's how you look at the minimap. You need to know where your own jungler is, for example. And if you do that, like if this is the process you use, then at the end, the defeat is still gonna, be dog shit. It's not like it just goes away, but it's like you got something else going on at the same time that also draws your attention. And if you notice, you're gonna switch between defeat and victory, but you're gonna somehow climb to gold 1 or something, because you're starting to, like, 80% of your ganks you're not dying anymore, and you notice that, and that's because you thought about it. Oh, I thought about where the jungler was, I'm not trading, right? That's where you get the change in how you perceive victory and defeat, and how you perceive, let's say, farming your jungle versus actively trying to win the game. And that is my motivational speech, not just kidding. Does this make any sense at all?
Yes, it makes sense.
It does. All right. Then that's good. So this is that's of course the riskiest one. This would be the most prone to not making sense, but that's good if it makes sense. And everything, I hope everything I say in the future is gonna make sense. Then if this is also like, acceptable. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I mean, obviously, it's like I might say something in game that is like, wait a second, this is not how that works. But it's like, these are more of like the, what's it called, specific things that most players don't deal with, right? Like, not a lot of players work with any sort of sheets or any sort of outside reference to the game. Not a lot of players look at pro play and actually pause it and go and think like, why does this guy trade? Where are the junglers? How do they impact the lane? Those are kind of the things where you can get most of your advantages on top of other people with similar qualities, right? But they don't do those things. That's how you kind of climb the ladder.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's just a little bit of topic about mentality, because it's like I can say like, yeah, but improvement matters way more, and that's what determines your rank in the long run. But it's like, everyone knows that. You know what I mean? Like, I know that as well, but I still get banned.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a different angle. All right. There are some, like, actually, I usually try to go over all the theoretical stuff and all that, like, beforehand, or, like, in the first session, for example. We haven't gone over a lot of practical stuff, which is obviously where all the magic does happen. Would you be willing to do a session in the future where we just orient it a little bit more on the practical side of things?
Yes, I am open to it.
Okay,
But
okay.
there's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
This laptop is a piece of shit.
Ha!
It is a MacBook Air running Windows,
Oh, God.
and the F keys most of the time do not work, so I don't use them to look at the map.
Fair enough.
But before my computer broke, I did. So I have it in me.
I see. Okay.
Not allow that to happen. That would not be an acceptable setting to have.
Yeah, you just get completely crushed because you can't move your mouse properly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, that's good. And when you say it's a piece of crap, okay, your F keys don't work. Does the rest function sort of appropriately?
The rest. I can't play ADC or like, yeah, because if there's like too many, I don't know, it's only with ranged champions, but I'll like a drop to 20 FPS in a fight.
Okay.
So I can't team fight on an ADC because my computer will lag. if that means anything, just in case you tried turning me into an ADC player for some reason.
Just in case. It's just
Yeah.
the sneaky move at the end there. By the way, you gotta play AD carry to climb. All right. Nah. Okay. That's fair. So, yeah. I mean, it is what it is, right? That's I can't coach a computer.
Ooh, unfortunate.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. We can try overclocking it, beating it, throwing it out the window, but not gonna coach it. Yeah, just that's all right then. It's like that's fine as long as it's like as long as you feel like it's still doable, right? Just trying to envision like is it possible for to play and do stuff in the current state, and if you still have enough FPS in general to like do everything in like especially like in the first half of the game, then you know it's up to you, of course. Like in that case, it doesn't have to be a problem. But I'll keep it in mind. Keep the F keys in mind. Hehe. But yeah, that's fair enough. And when would you like? So the two options in that kind of thing, like, one of them is that I really just go over. Let's say usually what I do is I give a few exercises and then go over them because if all of them work perfectly, then sure it doesn't need to be that way. But either go over a VOD or go over some of the exercises and then a VOD, something like that, in the more focus on actual gameplay. So would that be something you want to do in, let's say, some amount of time, like, I don't know, 2 weeks or 1 week if you want to? It's up to you.
Like review of exercise progress.
Nah, mostly like probably I think a VOD would probably be easiest, but usually I also review exercises. So usually it's a combination. I usually try to get both done, unless it's like jungle where it's just completely useless. If someone can't clear efficiently, I don't want to look at their VOD. You know what I mean? It's just like you would climb by having more HP when you leave the jungle, and that's like okay. But for top lane, yeah, I would usually also want to see a VOD, because that's like, yeah, invariant to knowing like how to improve.
Okay. Yeah.
So, would you want to do it in like 1 or 2 weeks, or how long do you feel like you want
Yeah,
the inventory?
holidays just started.
Okay.
Yeah. Last day of school yesterday was good. Like,
Ooh.
um, yeah, 1 or 2 weeks. Um, it actually depends on like, are you giving me exercises to do now, and then like